Welcome everyone to day 2 of House TRW. I'm going to call the meeting to order, and with that, we will take a quick roll.
Senator Boner.
Excused.
Senator Hicks. Here. Senator Jones. Senator Schuler. Representative Campbell.
Here.
Representative Connolly. Representative Harshman.
Here.
Representative Jarvis.
Here.
Representative Provenza, excused. Representative Storr. Representative Thayer. Present. Representative Wharf.
Here.
Co-Chairman Landon.
Here.
Chairman Byron.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you for that. Before we get to a little bit of housekeeping, I do want to recognize a few other electeds in the room. I did notice current sitting colleagues of ours. Representative Riggins is here. If Representative Riggins isn't back, please wave. Thank you for being here, Representative Riggins. Great to have you at House TRW. And I am going to go and hand off the Casper contingent to my good co-chair, Senator Landon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I first of all wanted to thank the committee for yesterday. I thought we had a great discussion. I really liked some things that we've got on track and look forward to that second meeting. I want to thank the director of the Game and Fish and everybody who contributed yesterday. Jim Magagna was here. I thought that was really, really good. And so I wanted to thank the committee. I want to thank State Parks for last night. We spent a little time out at Edna's Kimball Wilkins, and it just reminds us of the treasures that the state of Wyoming has, and the work that our state parks and cultural resources folks do. I see Visit Casper is here today, and they know all about that, but there's so many treasures out across Wyoming, and don't forget that as you go into the summer. These guys are doing a great job out there, so thank you for that. We have a couple of commissioners here with us this morning. Dave North is here in the back. Peter Nicolason is here right up front here. And the mayor, Ray Pacheco, is here. We appreciate all of those guys being here. And Mr. Chairman, take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And yeah, I will definitely agree with you on the tour last night. It was pretty special. It's my second time I've had the opportunity to tour that park in this capacity. And not surprising, we saw completely different features and pretty special and getting great visitation out there. With that, TRW usually has a beginning script that I don't read, and I've never read it as a chairman. I ad lib, and I do it. Our good colleague, former Representative Newsom, did. I said, be nice or leave, but I am going to go ahead and read some of it today. As we begin the meeting, I want to call your attention to the committee's rules of decorum. Although it may seem awkwardly formal, speakers will address their comments and questions to the chairman, myself, not to individual committee members or to others in attendance. This helps us avoid personalities and comments of personal nature. Comments will be directed to the issue under discussion by the committee. Distracted comments and unrelated side issues are out of order. Speakers will avoid personal criticisms, ridicule, or name calling directed at anyone else in attendance of the meeting. This includes comments of a personal nature directed to other speakers, audience members, or members of the committee. For audience members, we expect you will refrain from any behavior that disrupts the orderly conduct of the meeting. Specifically, the rules prohibit speaking out when another person is talking, carrying on loud and distracting side conversations, shouting, clapping, or booing in response to a speaker's comments. With that, I will also encourage everyone to silence their phones, myself included, and my committee members. And if you do have to take a call, that door sometimes is open and sometimes it's shut. So please get far away from the door if you're going to take a call. We will take a bathroom break roughly around 10:30. And with that, I think we'll get going here. I'm pretty excited to welcome Kevin Baker, Deputy General Counsel, and the representative from R Hydro and R Plus Energies. And we're going to give him about 25 minutes. Kevin did tell me this morning that his presentation could last 2 to 2.5 hours. If you look at our agenda today, that would get us home tomorrow about midnight. So this is the busiest a TRW committee's ever been, except for Camo at the Capitol. And I think it's really awesome that everyone's here. And I want to give everyone their proper time and respect their time when we get to public comments. So we do have a couple agencies, including the project council. And with that, we'll get going. Correct. Yeah, we have a number of directors from and different folks from BLM, DEQ, BOR. So when they do come up, I will formally welcome them and allow them to obviously speak. But with that, we'll get going with Mr. Baker's comments. Welcome.
Thank you, Chairman Byron and Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Kevin Baker. I am the Deputy General Counsel for R+ Hydro. This is the first time I've had to shorten a presentation down significantly. Bring it closer. Can you hear me now? This is the first time I've had to shorten a presentation very quickly, but I will try to go through this very in an orderly manner. And if there are questions, please don't hesitate to ask. I will go very fast, if that's all right. Heather, why don't you go ahead and hit the next slide? So just a quick overview about who R+ is. We're an independent power producer out of Salt Lake City, Utah. We develop and own large-scale utility energy facilities across a myriad of technologies. We have about 70 employees. We're backed by large capital and the Gardner Group. R+ Hydro has 3 primary pump storage hydro facilities that are in production, or at least in their licensing process now. Seminole is the farthest one in that process. We also have one in Ely, Nevada, as well as in Salt Lake City. Just on a personal note, R+, in my opinion, is an amazing value-based and community-based corporation, and one that Wyoming can rely on to develop large-scale energy projects. Next slide, please. So we're here to talk about Seminole. Just a few details to give you an overview of what it is. It's located in Carbon County. It has a capacity of 972 megawatts for over a 12-hour storage period. So it's an enormously large project to meet Wyoming's future energy needs. It represents a $3 to $4 billion capital investment in the community and in the state, which is significant. It uses minimal land, so it's about 114 acres for the upper reservoir, and it utilizes the lower reservoir as part of the project. It has a co-located transmission line with the WAPA existing transmission line into the ALS substation. And it is pump storage is actually one of the longest duration, most effective, and most cost efficient types of energy storage that's on the market today. Next slide, please. So what is pump storage and how does it work? I put this slide in just to give you an idea of what the principle is, how it works in Seminole. Essentially, pump storage is a very simple concept. You store water in a lower reservoir and you move it to a higher elevation to store energy. And then when the grid needs it, that water is released back through hydroelectric turbines, similar to the ones that are in the Seminole Dam, to produce energy onto the grid when it's needed. They're typically around 8 to 12 hours in energy duration. That's more of a factor of how much water is up there. You can have them longer if you want, but those usually become less effective and less efficient. It's a proven type of technology. So there are 43 in existence today. All of them are open loop like the Seminole project is. They've been in production or in use on the grid for almost 100 years now, so since 1930. They're well known, they're well understood, and they're a very safe technology. They operate in highly sensitive areas, ecological areas, and such. The Cabin Creek pump storage project, which is an Excel pump storage project just west of Denver, is the closest one. Sits on about 330 acres in the Arapahoe National Forest. They're designed to last for a long time, 100 years or more. Usually they last longer, so they're generational in their effect and in benefits. So they provide long-term energy, not only for the grid for generations, but also benefits to the communities and the counties as well in terms of tax benefits and jobs, which I'll talk a little bit about more. Go ahead, next slide. I'll go through this just really quick from a policy perspective. Whenever you're looking at and trying to decide what types of energy facilities you want to develop here in Wyoming, I always tell people it's about 3 things. It's about abundance, meaning does it provide the type of energy that's needed, base load energy, dispatchable, reliable energy? Is it affordable? Does it have the type of costs that bring real benefits and efficiencies to ratepayers, so they're not paying too much for their out of their own earned income to have energy in their lives? And finally, reliability. Does it provide the type of energy that's needed, dispatchable, firm, so that when the lights need to be turned on, they can actually be turned on? The nice thing about the Seminole project is that it checks all of these boxes. It provides firm, reliable, dispatchable energy at an affordable cost, and it provides the type of energy that Wyoming is actually going to need in the future. Next slide, please. So I put this slide in. I had a long discourse about that. But the real base of this slide is that Wyoming's long-term energy outlook is it's going to need energy and soon. If you look, and I'm going to try and see if this will work. The presentation doesn't, this pointer doesn't work well. The bar chart at the top shows the amount of energy that's going to be required in the Rocky Mountain region, which Wyoming is a part of. So on the left, you have what is known as WEC. This is the grid system that Wyoming is attached to. Within that system, that black circle there, so it's Wyoming and Colorado, parts of South Dakota and Nebraska are the grid for this particular subregion. Within the subregion, energy forecasts are supposed to go from 14 gigawatts to 17 gigawatts within the next 8 years. That's a tremendous amount of energy for a very small area in a very short amount of time. In addition to that, you can see on the right that energy generation for this region is going from 20 gigawatts down to 18 gigawatts. So you have increasing load and decreasing supply at the same time. That's a double-edged sword for the state and for the utilities. As a result of that, you can see the decreasing line on the top. So that cascading gray line that comes down is the available energy that it is today. And you can see on the left, you have about a 50% reliability factor existing in Wyoming. By 2034, that goes down to 7%. Okay, and that is below the required margin, which is the red line, which is about 14 to 15%. These reliability margins are not nice to have, so they're required. If you're below these types of margins, brownouts, blackouts become inevitable. What does that mean for Wyoming? It means a lot of things. It means that there's going to be growing pressure and significant new generation and transmission within the system. So Pacific Corp, Idaho Power, all the Black Hills Power are going to be asking for new systems, new opportunities to do that. There's going to be increasing energy competition within the states and within WEC. In fact, if you look at Utah, Governor Cox has put together Operation Gigawatt to double the amount of energy in Utah in the next 10 years. That's 4 gigawatts just for the state alone. If you think about the policy perspectives that are behind that, it's enormous. And Wyoming is facing some of the same situations going forward. Demand will be outpaced. Since demand is outpacing supply, there will be increasing use of existing infrastructure, particularly at the AOS substation. So congestion, overuse of lines and things like that will become a factor in the ability to deliver energy to Wyoming. And also new generation is likely to come online that will need large scale energy. It's like Seminole and other types of projects going forward. So I just wanted to reiterate that Wyoming is actually at an inflection point right now as it comes to its energy needs and its energy demands. I read an article just a couple of weeks ago that Cheyenne got a brand new data center that's going to triple Wyoming's energy output in the next year. So this is a serious issue. I mean, it's one that impacts all of us. And I recognize that we have to balance where we build and how we build, and we'll have a discussion about that later on. Just a quick note about FERC and who FERC is. FERC is the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. They are charged by Congress to develop and manage and to license large-scale hydroelectric facilities. It's under the Federal Power Act. It's in their charge. They've actually been doing this for over 100 years. They're responsible for about 2,500 dams in the United States today, with about 55 gigawatts of hydroelectric power. The Federal Power Act itself is an amazing statute. It grants them a lot of authorities, and they're completely different than like a mine that you would see at BLM. And there's a lot of authority and decision making that FERC has to go through. FERC actually is an amazing organization. They're in charge of wholesale electricity and grid reliability in the United States. So they're like the Costco, if you will, of electricity. They are the ones that the states go to buy energy, to make sure that the rates and tariffs are fair, that the interconnection processes are managed appropriately. So they have an important role, and they manage that role very well. Next slide, please. Very quickly, and this is part of the reason why we're here today, is that FERC has released the draft environmental impact statement for the Seminole project. And in that draft environmental impact statement, they made 3 fundamental conclusions, and I'll go very slowly through them so that we understand them. This was issued in September of last year. I would like to highlight that the final environmental impact statement is due here on June 12th, so just in the next couple of weeks. The first thing that FERC concluded was that the project would deliver reliable, affordable energy to the region, along with important ancillary services and grid stability. Their analysis also shows that it will represent an approximate annual savings of $200 million to ratepayers here over other projects that would otherwise require to be built. That's a significant long-term savings for Wyoming and the ratepayers. Second, FERC found that sufficient environmental protections exist under its recommended alternative. These include specific protections for the North Platte River and the Miracle Mile, as well as for wildlife, including bighorn sheep. And finally, FERC recommended issuance of a license under its recommended alternative. One thing that you have to understand about the Federal Power Act is that FERC is required to weigh the public benefits against the project impacts. And they have to weigh it recreation, environmental, fisheries, and so forth on an equal basis against the project. So when FERC says that they're ready to issue a license, that means that they've gone through that process, that they evaluated it, they've put everything on par and deemed that the project has a significant benefit to the public and that the environmental aspects have been addressed appropriately. And that has been done in this process. I put this quote up here from a policy perspective, just for you, and I'd just like to read it so you understand where FERC is coming from. They said, should an original license for the project not be granted by the commission and or other required federal authorizations not be granted by Reclamation, BLM, the Corps, or WAPA, the proposed services that the project would provide to the grid would need to be provided by other existing projects or in some other fashion by the system operator. Thus, power from the project would help meet demand in both the short and long term. In my opinion, FERC is making clear that the choice is not simply whether to build the project, but also what follows if we do not. The absence of this project carries with it its own set of impacts: reduced resource adequacy, higher costs to ratepayers, and the likely need to pursue other projects that may impose greater environmental impacts or penalties to the state. Next slide, please. So let me go through what the project is and what the maps are. I apologize if they're hard to see. You can get the next slide too, please. Thank you. So this is a project overview. As you can see, and I apologize, the pointer doesn't point very well, but you can see at the top where the upper reservoir is located. It's about 114 acres. It impounds 13,400 acre feet of water. The operational capacity of the dam itself, and this is a dam, is about 10,800 acre feet. So we leave about 2,000 acre feet in the upper reservoir at all times to prevent air from entering the system and causing cavitation. We will build a bridge just north of the Seminole Dam. It's called the access bridge to access the underground tunnels. We will also have an inlet-outlet structure that will be underwater, about 100 feet underwater. And then there will be a transmission line, and I'll show you what that looks like from the upper reservoir following the existing WAPA transmission line itself. A couple points that I want to point out is that the Seminole Reservoir is about 1 million acre feet of water. The Cordis Reservoir is about 6,000 acre feet of water, and then Miracle Mile is just north of the Cordis Reservoir itself. Next slide, please. One of the prime features of the project is that most of the operations are underground. This is why the project's impacts are low from a surface perspective. The tunnels are about 30 feet in diameter, so in comparison to the Eisenhower Tunnel. There is a powerhouse to which the water will flow through up to the upper reservoir and back through to generate power. That is about 7 stories tall and about 100 yards. So it's about the size of a football field and 7 stories tall. So it's a very big underground structure. There's a lot of underground construction that we have to undertake to facilitate it. Next slide, please. This is a picture of the transmission line. It goes from Seminole. It parallels the WAPA transmission line. As I said, this is actually a design choice. It's meant to reduce environmental impacts, visual impacts, and the sort. So we don't have to produce a new transmission line over undisturbed ground for a long ways. It goes into the ALS substation, which is a critical area of infrastructure, not only for Wyoming, but for the nation as well. Next slide, please. I'm often asked why here. That's probably the fairest question I get all the time. This area is actually, pump storage is actually very hard to build in various locations. You can't just go to any mountain and put a reservoir. You have to have the right topography. So you have to have a bowl or the right shape of that to actually facilitate that. It has to have the right geology. So it has to support the facilities because it is heavy. We want it to be near large transmission and large generating facilities so that it can have the greatest effect. And I would also note that this site has been recommended or evaluated by the Bureau of Reclamation in its system as one of the top and prime locations for pump storage in the nation over the past 60 years. This site is strategic. It is beneficial to the area. It increases the amount of energy within the system. So for example, the Seminole Dam produces about 45 megawatts of power each year. This is 975 megawatts, and it will significantly increase the amount of energy in that area. It is an industrial area. There are 2 dams there, and the WAPA transmission line actually goes through the upper reservoir site. It is on both USBR land and BLM land, and so we work with both those agencies for rights of way and things like that as well. Next slide, please. In terms of water, I recognize that water is one of the primary, it's a hydroelectric project, so water is very important to it. Water is also a major issue for states, particularly in the West. And Bob, we talked about that a little bit earlier, and I recognize that. Again, it's a 13,400 acre feet for initial fill, 10,800 acre feet that will be cycled back and forth between the 2 reservoirs. I want to emphasize to you that this project does not consume serious amounts of water. The vast majority of water is brought up to the upper reservoir and returned back to the Seminole Reservoir and sent back down into the system. Thus, it has a beneficial use, but it is non-consumptive. And that's very important, not only for downstream users, but also for Wyoming's obligations on the Platte River Recovery Implementation Program. We have partnered with Casper Alcova Irrigation District and USBR to acquire the water rights. We have an existing option agreement right now with CADE, and we're working through the rest of that with USBR. You should not think of those water rights as being suspect. We have a process going through, and we fully expect to have those finalized within the next few months. And again, the project is fully PRIP compliant. It's coming from existing water rights. We're not going to harm individuals downstream, nor are we going to affect the flows of from the Seminole Reservoir to the Cordes Reservoir and into the Miracle Mile. And that's an important environmental protection, not only for endangered species downstream, but also for other water right users. Next slide, please. Benefits to the community. These are substantial. Again, it's a $3 to $4 billion capital investment into the state. It represents about $9 million estimated annual property tax to Carbon County. That's significant. It's a 100-year asset. So these are dollars that the county can rely on, they can plan on, and they can utilize for public services like policing, schools, healthcare, that type of stuff. It will provide significant employment to the area, about 30 to 35 full-time jobs. These are well-paying jobs similar to the mines. So up north, there will be benefit-paying, vacation-paying jobs that you can build families and such around. In addition, it will be provide about 300 to 500 construction jobs during the area. Our goal is to hire locally as much as possible, and because we want to benefit the communities. We're going to be there for a long time. These are temporary jobs, but they bring significant benefits both to Natrona County and to Carbon County during the construction process. Next slide, please. So very quickly, and this is probably what the committee is most interested about, these are the primary concerns that have been raised about the project, and they are twofold. First are community concerns about impacts to the watershed, so the Miracle Mile, the Cordes Reservoir, and the Seminole Reservoir during operations. And second, concerns about wildlife and other impacts during construction, particularly bighorn sheep. Next slide, please. I'll go first through water quality and impacts to the Miracle Mile. We'll talk about water quality, turbidity, fish entrainment, and fish habitat. Next slide, please. So one of the things that I think is phenomenal, and we have a great story to tell about the project, is that on March 5th, Wyoming DEQ issued the 401 water quality certification. This is a major milestone for the project. It represents significant time and investment in the process. I worked personally with the DEQ for many years to develop a robust regulatory framework that protects the Miracle Mile and the 2 reservoirs. It's based on sound science from a water quality model that the DEQ had direct input on. We had some of the nation's foremost hydrologists on this, and it's a framework and a plan that the state can rely on and have comfort that the project will protect both the water quality. It will not degrade the waters, both the physical and the biological characteristics of the water, and it will meet all water characteristics or all water quality requirements at all times. So the water will be protected, the fish habitat will be protected. Casper will still have the opportunity to use it as drinking water. Irrigation will still occur. The project will not affect the water, will affect Wyoming's waters. Next slide, please. So this here is, we're going to get into the weeds, and I'm going to go very quickly through this. And so if you have additional questions on it, please don't hesitate to fire at me on those. I'm having a hard time reading it myself. So what you see here is the water quality model. It was developed with Wyoming DEQ. It focused on the years 2013 through 2016. And you can see that here on the bottom. So 2013 is on the left, which is the low water year in Seminole, which we're experiencing right now. You have a normal year and a high year. And what this flow does is you can see that it models both the project and then project without the Miracle Mile temperatures without the project, okay? And so you can see that it parallels almost exclusively all the way through the entire system, particularly in normal and high water years, what the temperatures would be in the Miracle Mile itself. The only exception that occurs is in low water years for the Seminole Reservoir. And it was found that at maximum operations, the project could have a potential to exceed water quality standards by 0.1 of a degree Celsius. It's a very small exceedance over a short period of time that occurs once every 10 years. That's important. And so what we did is that any exceedance, no matter how small, no matter what it is unacceptable for the project. And we worked hard with the Department of Environmental Quality to develop an adaptive management plan that manages this process. In other words, we will curtail operations in the event that water in the Seminole Reservoir becomes too low and water is trending towards exceedance levels. In this manner, we are fully protecting the reservoir and the Miracle Mile. I would note that the water levels that actually set where the curtailment will occur are set at highly conservative levels, meaning that the model is proactive, not reactive. So we're putting in protective measures in terms of a curtailment of the project long before any exceedance will occur. We're required to monitor, and I'll talk about that on a slide in the next few slides. We're required to monitor temperature and water elevations and report those to the DEQ on regular basis. The area of biggest concern during this timeframe is the September timeframe. What happens in the late summer with the Seminole Reservoir is that the reservoir will stratify, meaning that warm temperature will go to the top, cold temperature will go to the bottom. And because the Seminole Dam is a bottom release dam, the temperatures at the bottom of the dam have a greater impact on the Miracle Mile. The project does not insert a thermal load. In other words, we're not heating the water, we're not cooling the water, and you can see that on the model here that the only thing that happens in the low water year is a shifting of time when the maximum temperature of the Miracle Mile would naturally occur. There is no exceedance that occurs at any time from what would normally occur in the Miracle Mile. You can also see in the high water year that it actually has a positive effect. It's a reductive effect, meaning that in those types of circumstances that the project actually has a beneficial benefit to the environment itself in terms of temperature. So it's not just, hey, the project is bad. It actually has beneficial impact to the habitat for fish and the Miracle Mile as well. I would like to, I'm going to read to you what the conclusions are so that you know what they are, and then we can move forward on it, okay? There are 4 conclusions that I want to highlight to you, and they're on the left here. Number 1, there is no impact to water temperature under normal and high water conditions, full stop. A small potential to exceed water quality standards exists in the Miracle Mile for a brief, approximately 2-week period in September during low water conditions occurring once every 10 years. Number 3, There is no adverse effect to dissolved oxygen, pH, or nutrients or other water quality characteristics. And there is an overall improvement in both temperature and dissolved oxygen conditions within the Seminole Reservoir itself. Next slide, please.
Mr. Baker, just to thank you for all this, just to let you know, we're at about 25 minutes and I think it's certainly there's going to be some questions from the committee. So
Okay.
I'll give you about 5 more minutes.
All right. I'm going to fly through this very quickly then. For turbidity, we did conduct a 3D model for that. Turbidity is a low risk. We have controls over that. The inlet outlet structure that you see controls the flows and minimizes the power, the pressure that goes into it. There's not going to be any erosion. The turbidity is a minor issue and it is controlled and operated with the EQ on that. Next slide, please. Fish habitat, we have done 2 fish habitat studies, and from entrainment, the FERC has concluded that there is a low risk of entrainment of fish. That's fish being sucked up into the reservoir or into the mechanics of it. That's because the inlet outlet structure is designed to allow flows slowly into the structure so that fish can actually avoid it. They're strong enough to swim away. It's also located in an area where small fish are not likely to be impacted. We've also done a fish habitat study, which shows that the project will not impact lethality of any fish population or affect optimum growth levels. So the fish will still remain, fishing will still occur, and the fish will remain unaffected by the project. That's a positive thing. Finally, next slide, please. Just so you know that there's a robust monitoring program in place that we work with DEQ on. It will be monitored by USGS, so a third party independent will be doing that. It will be done hourly. At the Miracle Mile for the life of the project. And then we will do monitoring in the Seminole Reservoir, when the reservoir allows it. So it freezes over and we can only actually monitor from May until October, but that's the prime period for that. And so we've all agreed that that's the right place to do that. Finally, I'm going to highlight, if the next couple slides, just go to the impacts. Why don't you go to the next slide, please. Construction, we've done a massive amount of work on construction. I want to highlight 3 things. We have moved the spoil pile closer to the main access tunnel at the request of Wyoming Game and Fish to reduce impacts to the bighorn sheep in the area. That reduces the transportation of the haul trucks from the main access tunnel by about 2 miles, reduces noise, vibration, all that type of stuff. So we still have the same amount of activity, but we've reduced the area for that. That's a material reduction and a protection measure for the bighorn sheep. The upper reservoir, we've put forward that we will construct from March until November, and we'll leave out December through February to protect habitat and bighorn sheep up in that area. We actually do need a significant amount of time and access to construct it. It's a 5-year construction. The vast majority of impacts will occur over the first 3 years as we remove the material from underground. But once that material is removed, then it's about putting the turbines in and that type of stuff. So even though it's a 5-year construction, the impacts are more limited. I want to highlight that the Seminole State Park will still be open under normal conditions. Miracle Mile will still be open. None of these projects are within the project area, and the primary impacts are related to traffic on the road, and we've minimized that to the greatest extent possible. We've also moved the inlet outlet structure away from the state park further north to reduce impacts to the state park as well. Next slide, please. My final thing, and I had a lot to talk about on this, is bighorn sheep. This is, in my opinion, the last remaining issue to be resolved for the project. I will admit that there is not alignment right now between the state, BLM, USBR, and FERC on this issue. Our goal is to find meaningful and reliable ways to protect the herd. That's always been our goal. We have advanced significant protection and mitigation measures that are outlined in the presentation. I won't go through them, which include the state to make sure that they have a seat at the table, that they have access to all monitoring, that they are involved and engaged in it. We've tried to take into consideration the comments that they've made to FERC by removing areas like Alternative A, which was of major concern to them. We've also proposed significant conservation easements as well as wildlife funds to help protect the herd going forward. The herd is important, and there are a lot of factors that go into it. The fact that FERC has made a recommendation that we can move forward demonstrates that at least an independent agency has said that it can be protected. And I recognize that there's debate about how it will be protected, and we want to engage. We have engaged with all agencies, including the state. I'm hopeful that once the final environmental impact statement comes out, that we can all get back together and find a meaningful pathway forward on that to make sure that the herd is protected. And from my perspective, it will be. That's it. From a process perspective, I just had a slide that talked about what was in the DEIS. It is a robust document. A lot of process went through it. A lot of public comment went into it. It is a robust and fulsome document, from my opinion, and something that the state can rely on.
Thank you, Mr. Baker. Yes, co-chairman, please.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And Mr. Baker, thank you for adjusting on the fly this morning. We are loaded down on an agenda, and we want to hear, of course, from everybody. And in order to do that, we can't spend as much time with any one of those folks that we would like to. We could have spent all morning with you, learning even more, but just wanted to thank you for abbreviating so that we can, and we'll no doubt have you alongside for questions later and maybe a final comment or two. But we've got a lot of folks who want to weigh in, and so wanted to thank you for being here.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you. And before we hop to our next presenter committee, any questions of Mr. Baker? Any questions? And I will have him back up. Senator Hicks, please.
Appreciate you coming here today. I always like to see the entrepreneurial spirit that this country puts out and trying to solve solutions to difficult problems with our energy demand and needs. But a couple of questions real quick, and I'm just going to hit a couple high level and maybe come back later, not so much on the detail stuff. So one of the questions I have is with this project, when the Inflation Reduction Act was passed, they included pump storage as eligible green energy for federal tax subsidies under this program. I'll just remind everybody that the Fraudulent Inflation Reduction Act wasn't very popular with many people in Congress at the time. But my question is, if you run the calculations, because this is an eligible project under the IRA for the ITC, those federal tax credits, what do you anticipate that you guys will derive with association? How many tens of millions or hundreds of millions of dollars is this project eligible for those federal tax subsidies?
That's a fantastic question, Senator, and I appreciate that. The IRA is actually quite important, at least in the renewable industry. And I understand the political sides of that and don't want to discount that either. I will say that the Trump administration actually kept the tax credits for pump storage and hydroelectric projects in the IRA and got rid of the rest of them. And that was done for a specific reason, because they wanted to encourage the development of hydroelectric projects in the country. In fact, President Trump, when he first entered office, issued a national executive order requiring agencies to promote hydroelectric projects like Seminole and to expedite their permitting processes. It's in the national interest, these types of projects. So that's why the credits are there. We are obviously motivated and want to qualify. We have to start construction by 2034 before we are able to even qualify those credits. It's up to a 50% credit. So it's, if it's a $3 to $4 billion project, it's a big credit that comes in. That's not money that the government is paying to us, by the way.
Understand.
That's money that is being directed towards the investment of infrastructure projects.
Mr. Hicks?
Yeah,
Senator
Mr.
Hicks, sorry.
Chairman, just one again, kind of a high level overlook project. Would you consider this project kind of a world-class pump storage project?
I would. And like I said, there are 43 operating projects in the country today. This is a big project. It's not the biggest in the country. It will be one of the first that's built in the last 30 years. There are reasons for that and go into it, but it will be a world-class facility. It will provide an enormous amount of energy for Wyoming, for the grid, and provide it for long-term generational benefit.
So, Mr. Chairman, just to follow up on that. So you talked about earlier the declining in energy production in Wyoming, but you didn't talk about the causal effects for that. And the simple fact, Wyoming's a net exporter. At one time, 25% of all the energy consumed in this country was produced with Wyoming coal and natural gas. And so we're seeing a decline, but you didn't talk about the decline in the energy production and the association of all these other states that we have that have enacted renewable portfolios that have instigated that decline in energy production in the state of Wyoming.
Yeah.
And so now you're talking about a world-class regional project that the ratepayers in Wyoming don't need because we're already a net exporter of coal or of electricity, even today, correct?
That is correct.
So most likely this energy is not going to be consumed in the state of Wyoming. It's really designed just to balance out the existing renewables on the system, aka the wind power. It's not creating any more electricity. It's just designed to balance that out. The decline in electricity production in the state of Wyoming is directly associated with other states' renewable portfolios, and this electricity will go to balance the wind energy power to subsidize those people in other states. Is that not correct?
That is partially correct, if I could answer that. And I appreciate the question. So pump storage has
Mr.
actually,
Baker. All right, just a protocol. If
I'm letting it go. We usually address through the chairman to
Oh.
Senator Hicks. Yep.
sorry.
It's your first time here. I'm not going to hold your feet
My
to the fire, but
apologies, to
my colleagues are holding my feet to the fire. So
I hope
No,
you might be to the fire.
continue the dialogue, and then we are going to have a few more questions. So
Yeah.
let's be aware of
I
that.
think that's an excellent question that Senator Hicks has asked. And personally, like I said, I was the general counsel for Rio Tinto. That's the Antelope, Jacobs Ranch, Cordero Rojo mines here in Wyoming. I'm fully aware and understand the need for coal. I'm a big supporter of it, have been my entire life. Pump storage was actually first developed for coal plants and for nuclear plants. Okay, they are for base load. So you turn the plants on and you don't want to ramp them down. And so at 2 o'clock in the morning when energy was not needed, they would capture that energy, pump them up to the upper reservoir, and then they would put them back down onto the grid for plant efficiencies. That's what they were used primarily for. Today, they are being repurposed for grid efficiencies, primarily for new types of generation like solar and wind that are non-dispatchable, that are intermittent. Those are important. However, this type of project is for all types of energy. It's not just for renewable. It's needed for the grid itself, for the reliability factor. It provides ancillary services such as black start capabilities, frequency regulation, inertia, all of which the grid is required to have and all of which is going away right now. The other benefit for having pump storage, and when I tried to talk about this on the WEC slide, is that WEC is actually a large multinational area. It goes into Canada, down to Mexico, and there are other types of generations. So you have hydro and nuclear up in the Northwest. You've got solar and wind down south. You actually have wind here in Wyoming. Wyoming has some of the greatest wind assets in the country. And you have other generation assets throughout that. What pump storage does, it allows Wyoming to grab that energy and bring it in at low cost. And then it can be dispersed to Wyoming in that area at the cost that's there. Otherwise, at 6 o'clock in the evening, you're competing to buy energy with Utah and Washington and from other resources. So it is a completely important benefit to Wyoming, and it's not just for renewable energy. It's actually for the grid itself.
Representative Thayer?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Baker, for being here. And I am going to stay on the same topic, but again, talking about the construction and how it has mitigation, potential mitigation. Have you guys been, let me double check. Have you guys been issued a lease of power privileges? Again, this is a Bureau of Reclamation dam. And I'm just concerned about the blasting vibration and the tunnels, and that dam is a 1939 dam. So there's a lot of components on the dam and what happens after below that dam.
That is a fantastic question, and I appreciate it. Yes, we are not going to affect the dam by our blasting activities. We've done studies on this. Obviously, it's a big concern for USBR. They will be intimately involved in that. We are starting the process for a lease of power privilege. So you have an original license from FERC and you have a lease of power privilege from USBR, and together that's the licensing framework for the project. Both of them are under the FERC's NEPA process. And then you have the 404 permit, which is with the Corps. You have the rights of way with BLM and USBR and other Wyoming siting, those types of permits that will be coming later. But blasting is a big focus for us. The nice thing about it is that once we're about 1,000 feet in, the vibration, noise, and things like that are de minimis, and FERC actually addresses that in the draft environmental impact statement. It's an important issue, but it's not an impact that we're worried about.
And committee, just for your knowledge, I do want to get to our next presenter. It's 9:21. I'd like to get to that presenter by 9:25. So I noticed a few other hands go up. Representative Campbell, please.
Thank you, Mr. Baker, one for being here and for condensing things. You did really well. A lot of information very quickly, but easy to digest. So quick question, hopefully, on slide 19, when you talked about the Miracle Mile water temperature and comparing impacts from the project. My question, I guess, that data was taken from 2013 to 2016, which was 10 years ago, and then comparing impact of the project to the data from 10 years ago. Have there been any significant changes in the water or the environment in the last 10 years?
Mr. Baker, please.
Thank you. That's a great question. The 2013 to 2016 was the most representative data set that was available at the time the model was conducted. We actually considered historical data over a long period of time, and Wyoming DEQ asked us to use this data set for two reasons. One, because it linked the Seminole Reservoir to the Miracle Mile, and two, because it had a diverse hydrologic set of conditions that could be evaluated. So 2013 was a low water year, 2014, 2015 were normal, and 2016 was a high water year. 2013 was particularly important because it represented a low water year in the 10th statistical percentile from which we could draw significant scientific and robust conclusions from. It was done for that reason. We recognize that updated information will benefit the model, for sure. We are required to put 2 years of baseline data and modeling before we can even start construction. And so that data will be updated into the model, and we will incorporate the results from that. So it will be updated, but the modeling years were set by the state.
Committee, any other questions? Representative Jarvis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Baker. I have a quick question, I guess, because I'm hearing a lot of discussion, and it obviously was worth putting the Miracle Mile into this presentation. I guess my question, because I represent Natrona's, do several other legislators sitting up here, what was and you also talked about the fact that public impact and public comment was extremely important in that relationship. What has been the level of interactions that you've had with Natrona County specifically? Because clearly we're directly impacted with the Miracle Mile.
Yes, great question. This is a federal process, so our primary contacts have been through the federal process. We've coordinated with the federal delegation on this as well. We did present to Natrona County on the project about a month and a half ago, and we're available to engage with them as the project moves forward.
Mr. Chair.
Please, Representative.
When and where, like, did you meet with our city council or any, or
I met
did you?
with Casper with the city mayor about 2 or 3 years ago, and discussed the project with them. But we met with the county commissioners. We did a presentation about 6 weeks ago.
And the public was invited?
Yes,
To
it was
be
a
able
public
to be-
meeting at the commission meeting.
Thank you, and Representative Member, to go through the chair for the rest of the morning, and commenters that are testifying, please go through me. Any other? Please, Representative Connolly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have a question about the transmission stuff. Who's gonna be buying this electricity? Well, so what utilities or grid operators will purchase this stored power?
Mr. Baker, please.
That's a great question, and thank you for it. And it's one we get quite often. We do not have a power purchase agreement yet. That actually happens after licensing occurs. So it's an iterative process. So we're waiting to get the license and then we will go. Pacific Corp is obviously the most likely taker of this. They actually need the energy storage on their system. And we'll be negotiating and talking with them. There are also other opportunities for other power utilities to take this as well. But that's where we're focusing at the moment. It will go to Wyoming. The energy will be here in Wyoming. But as I said, Wyoming is a part of the grid. And Wyoming, even though Wyoming is energy independent and puts energy onto the grid, one shouldn't think that Wyoming is energy independent. In other words, Wyoming actually buys power from the grid from all of the areas we talked about when production is constrained or when it's more economic to do that. And that's one of the things that Dick Garlish talked about to the PUC just a couple of weeks ago, was that one of the challenges that they're facing cost perspective is that the wholesale power market costs are going up, and pump storage will allow Wyoming to capture that energy at the lowest cost and use it at later points in time.
Thank you, Mr. Baker, for that answer. Committee, any other quick questions before we go to Mr. Harrington? Seeing none. Thank you, Mr. Baker. Don't go far. Mr. Harrington, please come to the front, introduce yourself. And there's a reminder for everyone, introduce yourself when you come up to testify and remind us who you're representing. Mr. Harrington, take it away.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chairman, members of the committee. Patrick Harrington with Trout Unlimited. First, I want to say Trout Unlimited is the nation's largest cold water conservation organization with 350,000 members and supporters nationwide. Our mission is to bring together diverse interests to care for and recover rivers and streams so that our children can experience the joy of wild and native trout and salmon. That means we spend most of our time working on habitat projects, doing on-the-ground work to improve trout habitat. That has the added benefit of keeping water cold and clean for the rest of us that depend on it here in the West. I'll also add that we're not reflexively against energy development. In fact, at every meeting, every presentation we've given, we've said that energy development and conservation are not mutually exclusive. And in fact, I think it's something Wyoming can be proud of. They obviously can coexist when they are appropriately sited, designed to avoid sensitive habitat, and paired with rigorous science-based management. So it's in that spirit that I'll offer comments today, and I want to thank the committee for taking this up as an interim topic. I also want to be clear up front that we've done our homework. We've studied the public record extensively. We've commissioned an independent analysis of the water quality model. Our science team supported us in analyzing the technical aspects of this process, and we've documented those concerns constructively in the public record. So what I'll say today is focused and grounded in that work. I'm going to talk about three things today, see if we can't bump us back into some sort of schedule, but those will be fisheries, water quality concerns, concerns with the review process of this project, and then discuss whether this project is actually in the public's interest. I won't spend much, if any, time talking about terrestrial wildlife. There are folks sitting behind me who are much wiser on that, and so I'll leave that alone. So let's talk about fisheries impacts. We first got involved in this project in the spring of last year during the scoping process, realizing that this was largely flying under the radar of our members, largely anglers who fish the Miracle Mile and Seminole Reservoir. We started learning and looking at ways to share that information out. So we held public education sessions. We held 3 or 4 of them. The first we invited R+ to present at, and they joined us for that. It was a civil and productive conversation. We also have submitted those formal comments throughout the process, whenever possible, with the intent, again, of being constructive and adding to this project, ensuring that we're protecting our fisheries and wildlife that depend on it. We also spent a great deal of time trying to understand where the risks actually come from in this project. So our conclusion is fairly straightforward. For trout, and I'll speak specifically again for trout, this may change when you hear from folks who focus on terrestrial wildlife. The problem is with open loop design. This project itself is, maybe I don't need to park here too long, but it is a wind energy connected open loop project. The proponent is developing 10 or so of these across the country. Only one other is open loop. It'll be capable of transporting 10,000 CFS under full operations from the upper reservoir to the lower reservoir, outpacing the traditional inflow of the North Platte system. It obviously functions by pumping water uphill when the wind's blowing, probably, in the middle of the night when demand is low, and then running it back downhill when demand is high. I have seen in the DEIS roughly 60% efficiency, meaning it's buying power, running it uphill, and then running it back downhill at a 60% efficient rate. That interaction with the reservoir system is what creates sort of the initial and most fundamental concerns for Trout Unlimited. So earlier this year, I was asked by a legislator local here who's not in the room, if we're against this project, just say so. Is there anything that could get you on board? And I responded to him, maybe with my tongue slightly in my cheek, that if this was a closed loop system, you might see me standing across the reservoir with pom-poms as they turn this thing on. Of course, the devil's in the details there. So the issue isn't pump storage in general. The issue is with the design of this project. A closed loop system, an alternative not fully considered by FERC, could reduce direct interaction with the North Platte system and reduce many of the long-term operational impacts created by the project. We repeatedly asked for this to be considered in the public record. FERC's response to us was that they don't consider or evaluate alternatives that aren't promoted by the project applicant themselves. The applicant's response has been that the closed loop alternative isn't financially feasible. Financially feasible is a term you come back to over and over and over again in the DEIS. Yet the current proposal is also described as infeasible if it's not granted waivers from wildlife impacts, those rules that exist in the Rollins RMP, in the governor's executive order on sage grouse. To me, this feels a lot like stacking the deck in the preferred alternative's favor and less about fully evaluating alternatives as required by NEPA. The way I think about it is open loop is like floating a river with your PFD stowed under the seat. You'll probably be fine. It's probably legal. But if something goes sideways, you don't have many options left in front of you. So on water quality impacts, the primary concern from us is temperature impacts and turbidity, sedimentation in the river. On temperature, the upper reservoir, smaller size and location upon that hill leaves it exposed to environmental factors like warmer days, more wind, where it will see more warming or more cooling in the winter. Today, the coldest water comes out at the bottom. It runs downstream into Miracle Mile and produces what is an exceptional blue ribbon trout fishery. And in fact, those cold water conditions are exactly why it is an exceptional fishery. However, under normal operations, the DEIS says that this will create complete mixing in the reservoir, eliminating that thermal stratification. That'll result in warmer water in the summer going downstream and colder water in the winter, something which is clear in comment letters from the Game and Fish as well. This will also likely change the habitat distribution in the reservoir, something we can't entirely understand because the Game and Fish's request to have the habitat monitored or studied in the reservoir itself has not been completed. The DEIS itself predicts additional days above important temperature thresholds under certain operating conditions. We just heard that from the proponent. Tied to that is a concern that the DEIS uses fish kills, fish lethality as the main threshold. I think it's probably obvious that that's an inappropriate metric. Sublethal impacts to fish will create conditions in the Miracle Mile that are not favorable to trout. Small changes in that temperature threshold or in the waterway will create large impacts in the long term to fisheries. And these sublethal impacts really matter. It'll change feeding behavior of trout in the river. It'll make fish more susceptible to to disease. It reduces the growth rate, limits spawning success, and will ultimately reduce the quality of this fishery. The Miracle Mile isn't the Miracle Mile because fish are living right on the edge of dying. It's the Miracle Mile because conditions are consistently exceptional for trout. Protecting those conditions should be our goal. I also want to mention that winter water quality, as we just heard, will not be monitored. Those concerns still remain unresolved, and that's something that the Game and Fish shared. They are particularly concerned about impacts of ice development downstream in the Miracle Mile. On sediment, daily pumping will repeatedly disturb 7 decades of accumulated unconsolidated soil. The proponent relies on a rock blanket design, essentially riprap, at the inflow-outflow structure to control sedimentation. However, it was not possible for us to analyze the effectiveness of that because it was vaguely described and no engineered drawing was available and no successful application of that was cited. This matters because turbidity will also affect reproductive success, macroinvertebrates that trout depend on, fish behavior, water clarity, which has the knock-on impact of being an economic impact from lower catch rates, less successful guiding days. It also happens that Wyoming's second largest city is downstream, dependent on this water, which may see impacts in the municipal water supply from increased heavy metals in the water and from increased costs in managing that municipal water infrastructure. These aren't theoretical concerns, they're in the DEIS. On the water quality model, I will also sit here comfortably and say that our analysis confirmed that it is a high quality model. The concern is not about the model design, it's about the underlying data. The analysis, as we heard, relies on 4 years of water quality data from Seminole Reservoir. One of those years was a low water year, as we heard. And that matters because we also heard that low water years are where the impacts are going to be on water quality. However, it's critical to understand that in the record of Seminole Reservoir, there are 22 years, approximately 11% of the time, where water is lower than the lowest modeled year in the water quality model. So to me, that leaves one thing as true. It isn't, leaving those low water years isn't just problematic, it's misleading. We also know that future conditions are unlikely to look like historic conditions. The EPA and the University of Wyoming have both identified trends towards more days above 100 degrees, more wind, and lower snow water equivalent in the upper North Platte Basin. Those future conditions were not fully evaluated, nor were wildfire-driven hydraulic changes that could alter sediment and water quality dynamics. And finally, FERC identified the project area of influence from extending from the inflow of Seminole Reservoir downstream through the Miracle Mile to Pathfinder. Yet the model stops collecting data at its lowest point is at the outflow of Cortez Dam. So there's no data on the Miracle Mile. There's no data on the impacts throughout that system on the 5.5 miles of that river. So if we're trying to understand risk, why wouldn't we stress test the model under conditions where impacts are most likely to occur? On the adaptive management plan, we see challenges because the adaptive management plan is built on that water quality model and its underlying data. But before discussing it, I do want to give gratitude to the Department of Environmental Quality, who was consistently responsive and reasonably transparent with our questions throughout this entire process, and I've appreciated working alongside them. Our respectful disagreement is not with their professionalism. Our disagreement is whether the final framework adequately protects Wyoming's interests. So 3 concerns stand out here. First is the project is curtailed for, if the project is curtailed for water quality reasons, compliance is measured across a 15-day window. What that means is that they'll get a certain number of acre feet in those 15 days, depending on water level, that they can sort of bank and use as like a block grant of water. And this means that the proponent could, in theory, operate wide open for 3 days. Maybe it's the hottest day of the year. Maybe the sun's shining real bright down there in the North Platte. creating massive impacts, potentially fish kills downstream. And then for the next 12 days, they could curtail and still be in compliance, though that they've decimated the river. To me, this prioritizes operational flexibility for the proponent over proactive protective steps for the river. Second, DEQ does not clearly retain authority to shut down operations if impacts prove greater than anticipated. That's something we repeatedly requested. We were told that this isn't expected, that this is needed. And so in my mind, it seems like a very cheap insurance policy to protect Wyoming's interests. Third, the plan does not adequately account for changing future conditions, like I discussed before in the water quality model, but this also includes winter water quality modeling, despite specific concerns from the Game and Fish Department. One very specific concern is that the public record relative to the adaptive management plan from Game and Fish itself. The proponent has said in front of the Natrona County Commission and in the press, the Game and Fish was closely involved with the development of the adaptive management plan. Yet a letter in the record on November 10th, 2025, towards the end of the DEIS comment process, describes the Game and Fish's interaction with the project and with the adaptive management plan as, quote, they had limited opportunity to engage in the process, that draft materials were not provided in advance, that revised materials were shared without a request for review, and that the adaptive management plan, quote, does not specifically assess or address the department's concerns for potential water quality impacts to fisheries and aquatic habitats within the entire proposed project area. That should concern us all. I want to shift gears to talking about the process. So at some point, a reasonable person might ask, if there were still so many unanswered questions, why weren't they resolved during this review? That's what led us to begin examining the process itself. What we found was numerous state and federal agencies, conservation districts, and local governments repeatedly indicated that they lacked sufficient information to fully evaluate the project. Many reserved their right to comment down the line. However, there's no remaining public comment process on this project. A great example of this is the introduction of Alternative D, which was introduced by the applicant, not the agency, with about 2 weeks left before the end of the comment period over the Christmas holiday. In fact, in their cover letter introduction to Alternative D, the proponent described it as being developed in response to, quote, all relevant comments. We, meaning Trout Unlimited, Wyoming Wild Sheep Foundation, Wyoming Wildlife Federation, Theodore Roosevelt Conservation Partnership, Wyoming Trout Unlimited, Muley Fanatics Foundation, Pheasants Forever, North American Pronghorn Foundation, and Backcountry Hunters and Anglers hadn't submitted our comments. Neither had most, if not all, state agencies, local governments, and conservation districts. I'll admit this is probably just an unfortunate choice of words, but this is a process of arguing over words on a page that eventually lead to the impacts we all make on our state. Functionally, Alternative D shifts some of the facilities from BLM to BOR land, which has a less restrictive set of wildlife impacts. It does not avoid or mitigate those impacts to fisheries. It also does not move the project out of bighorn sheep critical range. Importantly, Alternative D was not accompanied by a revised environmental assessment. This is critical because NEPA comments are directed towards the agency and their alternative analysis, not an evolving set of applicant filings. I've never experienced an EIS process where the applicant has weighed in so actively in the process. What this resulted in was confusion. People didn't know whether their previous comments still applied, whether they needed to comment again, or what exactly they were being asked to evaluate. TU requested that they open another comment period on Alternative D and that they withdraw the DEIS so that they can integrate an Alternative D analysis from the agency. FERC did open up a comment process, but did not provide analysis or direction to the public and agencies on what they were expected to comment on. To date, no agency analysis has been released. More broadly, NEPA requires agencies to rigorously explore and objectively evaluate reasonable alternative. We've consistently argued that alternatives capable of substantially reducing aquatic impacts deserved more serious considerations. Alternative design and siting should be considered, and so should other grid stability projects. So let's land this thing by talking about the public interest. First, the proponent told the The proponent told the Natrona County Commission several weeks ago that the DEIS determines that this project is in the public interest and maybe implied it today. The DEIS does not say that. It says the applicant must demonstrate that this is in the public interest. It's critical to understand that FERC staff prepares the DEIS and their commission makes the final determination on licensing. That is a pre-decisional statement. It undermines the FERC's commission's licensing authority and again is misleading to the public. That isn't collaborative, honest, or a Wyoming way. So let's talk about the public interest. We heard just a minute ago that the need for this in Wyoming is still unclear. The project itself requires waiving impacts to Wyoming's way of life through impacts to recreation, wildlife, and public safety to be financially feasible. The socioeconomic impacts are geographically incomplete. The study in the record only studied Carbon County. And so when they told the Natrona County Commission or this body here today that Casper may see some of the growth from this or jobs from this process, there isn't significant, important, necessary information in the public record to make that claim. And maybe what stands out to me as most important here is that the public record is unambiguous. 281 out of 282 comments, 99.6% opposed to the project. There was one letter in the record that just said, "I like this project." It appeared to be in response to a petition Trout Unlimited wrote. 2/3 of those are from Wyoming, the vast majority from Rawlins and Casper, showing that the people that have to live with this project, that will live most closely to it, don't want it. With all this in mind, the public interest determination claim that the proponent is making is not based in fact. So as you work through this, it's important to remember that it's ultimately a federal process. You all are aware of that, I know. But Wyoming does still have a voice. And if the committee concludes that a project like this creates unacceptable risks, there are several policy paths available for the committee. One option would be to establish siting criteria for pumped storage. You may also consider clarifying expectations for water quality modeling, adaptive management, and agency authority when projects have the potential to impact these outstanding resource waters. And finally, if Wyoming ultimately determines that an open loop pump storage project presents risks that outweigh its benefits, the legislature could consider whether those facilities belong in the state at all. This isn't the first one. One was defeated in the 90s in Tongue River Canyon, Dry Fork Canyon, in the Bighorns, an open loop pump storage project. Those are, of course, policy decisions for the committee. So in closing, and at the end of the day, this is a debate about whether Wyoming isn't a debate about whether Wyoming supports energy development. Of course we do. The question is whether Wyoming should accept significant uncertainty in one of central Wyoming's most important fisheries and recreational landscapes when lower risk alternatives may exist and major questions remain unanswered. Trout Unlimited believes that Wyoming deserves more complete information, more rigorous analysis, and stronger safeguards before the project moves forward. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'd stand for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Harrington. Committee, any questions of Mr. Harrington? Representative Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Probably more a question for the two presenters, if I may. Significant concern in terms of turbidity. So my question, I guess, is, it was presented earlier that there's really, in terms of the studies that are being done, no significant impacts except for the spike during startup. So I was curious as to what that spike in turbidity might look like during startup and what those impacts might be.
Mr. Harrington, and I'm not going to give leeway to bring the previous presenter back up. We have a lot to get through, but Mr. Harrington, if you have a quick comment on that, I would happily hear it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Representative Campbell. What I would say is I live in Laramie. There was a development put on the edge of Spring Creek there behind the Albertsons and an exposed hill slope. We had a big rain event, created some increased turbidity because of all that exposed soil, led to a fish kill downstream, killing all the fish in that little creek. I don't know if that's the actual impact of startup, but what I can tell you is that we will experience those impacts of turbidity directly. You'll see them here in Casper. We'll see them through the Miracle Mile.
Thank you, Mr. Harrington. Committee, any other questions of Mr. Harrington? Senator Hicks, please.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I appreciate your concerns. I think the thing that strikes me the most is when we have almost 80 years of historical records, and I think you talked about this. To take 4 years it basically violates every statistical that you would ever use to run a legitimate statistical analysis. You look at the entire data set to make a determination of what those impacts is. And so I just wish could you reiterate those numbers, the number of years of exceedances during the historical record that were outside of those that were used for the analysis for this? Could you repeat that, please?
Mr. Harrington, please.
Mr. Chairman and Senator Hicks, sure, I can definitely do that. But first I will say, I believe that they used those because they described them as like the most statistically sound 4 years, or they had the most complete data from those 4 years. But what I will say is that comes from an independent analysis that TU commissioned with Fulham Hydrologic Solutions. The principal investigator there was a former operator of Seminole itself. The numbers are 22 years below the lowest water year modeled. Approximately 11% of the months is how it was categorized.
So, Mr. Chairman, just to follow up on that. So the analysis basically said that they used the data as that 1 year showed that there was going to be a temperature, a thermal impact to the fisheries downstream. But what you're telling me is there was 22 years in the data set that would have exceeded that thermal impact according to your analysis. Is that correct?
Maybe, I don't know if I would phrase it as thermal impact, but what I would say is lower water years, which is where we are most likely to see temperature exceedances.
Okay.
So there is a connection there. Yes.
So, Mr. Chairman, just one last
Senator Hicks,
follow
please.
up on
Yep.
that is the hydrology of the whole system. And so more than half of the water comes off the Continental Divide. And I think everybody in this room is acutely aware of what's going on in the Colorado River system with Flaming Gorge, with the CRISP units, with Lake Powell. And so it's the exact same hydrology that's driving the Colorado drives Seminole and the North Platte. And I think when you look at the context of the overall analysis of the big picture, you have to project that analysis out of what's going on to the overall hydrology within the North Platte, not just start at the beginning of what Seminole is. And we know this is getting drier. We have less snowpack, which is going to exacerbate this number. The way I understand the analysis, that there's going to be many more low water years than there would. Is that the way you would look at that, Mr. Harrington?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Hicks, yes. I would also add for the record that the proponent described in DEQ requires as part of the adaptive management plan an additional 2 years of baseline study ahead of construction. And I would just say with Seminole Reservoir sitting at 34% full, 2026 would be a great year to start that, because what we got in the water quality model is one low water year. I think what most of us that have spent plenty of time here in Wyoming know is it's year after year of drought where you really start to see the impacts. And, tied to the drawdown of Flaming Gorge, we'll probably make it through this summer with water downstream in some of those big reservoirs in other states. If we have another year like this next year, we're looking at dire situations. And what could have resolved this issue was 4 years of modeling 2013 instead of including those 3 higher water years, because then we would have had an understanding of what sort of a cumulative drought impact might be.
Thank you, Mr. Harrington. Committee, any other questions, Mr. Harrington? Seeing none, I'm going to go ahead and kind of rearrange the order a little bit in respect of state agencies. I'm going to bring Director Bruce up next, and we will get to everyone. I don't know if anyone out there knows, but my good co-chair does have spurs on today. It's the first time he's worn spurs in a long time, and he's spurring me under the desk. And it doesn't feel good, and he's really concerned about time, which in our time together is the first time I've seen him concerned about time. So I just want the committee to know that it is my goal to give everyone a bathroom break, because a minute ago I looked down and I had lost half my committee.
Hey, Mr.
It's my goal to give everyone a bathroom break at about 10:30.
Mr. Chairman, he's an old bareback rider, and I know he knows how to use it.
Yes, he does. My calf hurts. So with that, I'll welcome Director Bruce up, and please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee members. Good to be with you again here today, and thanks for this opportunity to speak on this important subject. Here with me today is Deputy Director Jeff Davis, and I'll be turning the mic over to him in a minute. We have a very active habitat protection section within the department that does reviews of these sorts of projects and any project that people want us to review in the state. And so that's what we'll be providing today is those recommendations and that review that we provided the project. So with that, Jeff?
Yeah, good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Again, my name is Jeff Davis. I have the privilege and honor of serving as a deputy director at Wyoming Game and Fish. I'm very excited to be here. Be kind if you have tolerance for it. I've been here a whopping 4 months. Although I've been in this industry for a pretty long time. Some might say too long. You've heard a lot from Mr. Harrington and Mr. Baker, so I want to be very mindful of the number of people behind us here and the importance of their feedback to you all and any questions you might have of them. So I'll cut my testimony really short. As Director Bruce mentioned, we have a habitat protection section that does a pretty phenomenal job, in my opinion, of reviewing these complicated projects through the body of science and through our professional experiences here in Wyoming. And this project is complex, as you can understand. And we've spent a significant amount of time reviewing this project and asking clarifying questions and working with the proponent to try to get to the avoid, minimize, and mitigate phase. So I do want to touch on a pretty serious concern we have that is, in our opinion, unresolved and we hope can be resolved, but it may be unresolvable. And that is, as Mr. Baker mentioned, the bighorn sheep. So the Ferris Seminoe herd is our healthiest herd in this state. It has a very high site fidelity. So these are animals that don't want to move away from the habitat that they've selected. This is, as mentioned earlier, crucial range for that particular herd. And while we definitely appreciate the project proponent working to minimize some of the impacts to the herd and the other fish and wildlife impacts that we've discussed with them, we still are very concerned about the ongoing activity there for 5 or more years on animals that have, they're somewhat fragile, I would say, and are very subject to stress levels that can increase disease, increase predation rates, and could put this particular herd from the healthiest to one that we're really having to be concerned about how we manage it moving forward. And its significance to the state of Wyoming and all the people that enjoy it, whether you're hunting those critters or whether you're watching those critters as you fish on the reservoirs. So I think with that, we'll, as we always do, we'll continue to work with the project proponent and make sure the public is informed of the impacts we see to fish, wildlife, and their habitats, and how we're trying to move through the process to make sure that those are avoided, minimized, and mitigated to the best extent practicable. So with that, I am happy to take any questions.
Mr. Davis, thank you. 3 minutes and 30 seconds. He wasn't kidding. Committee, any questions of our wonderful state agency, Director Bruce or Mr. Davis? Senator Hicks, please.
Didn't you, Mr. Chairman?
I did know that.
So, Mr. Chairman, for either the deputy director or the director, would you consider this is a reintroduced herd of bighorn sheep, is one of the largest bighorn conservation success stories in North America as far as a reintroduction effort? And then what role, second part of the question, Mr. Chairman, does this sheep herd play in the future of bighorn sheep conservation as far as a source population for continuing restoration of native bighorn sheep in the state of Wyoming? Two questions.
Mr. Chairman, Senator, I think you answered the questions with that question. Absolutely. Because like Deputy Director Davis said, is that it is our healthiest population. It does not have pneumonia. It is the source population for anything else we would do in the state. And Also to add into that, we heard some comments about benefits to the community. And I don't think I would be representing our constituents if I didn't talk about the benefits of the bighorn sheep hunting to the community. It is a very highly sought out license, not only in the state, but for non-residents as well. One of the most incredible opportunities people get is to hunt bighorn sheep in the state. And we currently issue 1.2% of those who apply for a sheep tag in this area. So again, lots of demand. And so we look at this as a very valuable resource, and so does our constituents.
Thank you, Director. Senator Hicks, follow up, you good? Committee, any other questions of Game and Fish? Yes, Representative, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have a quick question. The impacts to the Miracle Mile, can they be mitigated?
Director?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, we have not found a way to mitigate the impacts as of today. As you heard in other testimony, conversation has occurred with adaptive management and looking at it. But the risk there is risk. And we do not have a good solution at this point for mitigating those impacts fully.
Thank you, Director. Representative, anyone else? Representative Connolly, good morning.
Hi there. This is so serious. I'm really concerned. And I've read in here where it says that they might want to identify and request waivers for seasonal wildlife restrictions. What is that going to look like? And can you help me with that?
Director, please.
Yeah, so Mr. Chairman, Representative, when we work with proponents, we often look at these critical times of the year when wildlife are affected by disturbance. And that's when we put in, recommend some time periods to stay away from, depending on the species, depending on the issue. The proponent has asked for a waiver of that time period for sheep. And we cannot grant it based on the impacts that we know that would occur by granting it. So we're recommending not waiving that seasonal STIP recommendation.
Thank you, Director. Representative Connolly. Else Committee, anything else? Seeing nothing, I appreciate you, Game and Fish, for being here. Don't go far. I'm sure there could be follow-up questions later this morning. With that, I am going to let you off the hook, and I am going to go to, I think, the most appropriate at this point, given state agencies versus federal partners. And sorry to kind of throw this at you, state parks, but Director Glenn, are you ready to go? Then just for the room and those online listening, we'll go to Director Glenn next of State Parks, and then we'll do Bureau of Land Management and then Bureau of Reclamation, and then hopefully that'll get us to a quick 10-minute break. Director Glenn, welcome. Introduce yourself again, and welcome to TRW Day 2.
Good morning, Chairman. Good morning, Committee. Dave Glenn, Director of State Parks and Cultural Resources. First, I just need to initially say I take a little umbrage with Mr. Baker's comment about Wyoming having some of the greatest wind assets in the state. Having lived at the bottom of Casper Mountain and moved to Cheyenne and driving I-80 in the winter, I understand from an energy perspective, but from thousands of hours of moving snow, I struggle with wind being an asset in Wyoming. As I've always mentioned, that Wyoming State Parks Cultural Resources has the ability to kind of touch almost everybody within the state. This project actually affects 3 different departments within our agency: Wyoming State Parks, the State Historic Preservation Office, and also the Office of Outdoor Recreation. 45,000 visitors to the state park, hundreds of thousands of outdoor recreationists coming through, and then also the cultural clearance piece. And I'm going to pass it off to Carly-Ann Carruthers, who is our heads up our planning department, but we also have Brian Beatles on, who heads up our State Historic Preservation on. He's on online in case you have any questions.
Please proceed.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. So Carly-Ann Carruthers, I lead our planning section. And I would state that for the last 6 years, we've been pretty consistently engaged with this project. It is directly on Seminole Park, so that's an obvious link. And I would say that Our comments have been very consistent in that we are concerned about public lands access impacts directly to the state park. And we've been very firm in our belief that outdoor recreation and a visitor experience at Seminole State Park is inextricable from all of the things that Game and Fish just spoke about. Habitat is recreation, wildlife viewing is recreation, fishing is recreation. And so anything has the potential to disrupt that balance. We're very concerned about what people might be experiencing in that region. And that also leads us to broader impacts. We speak constantly about the importance of outdoor recreation to an economic impact. It's a huge sector in Wyoming, as is tourism. So really trying to take a broad impact, looking at how recreation manages all of this. I think the direct impact is obvious too. We've got boat ramps out there. We have people who are trying to get there. The road has to be used by this project, as it does anybody visiting that entire region. So just really trying to keep an eye on that. Yeah, just want to emphasize we've been consistent in that for about 6 years now. Yeah, we'll stand for questions.
Thank you. Committee, any questions of state parks? Questions? Senator Schuler, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to let you know I'm still awake over here. Been trying to leave you alone today. No, I think it's interesting that recreation is probably the one area that we haven't talked about much, but I think you hit my nail on the head. I would like to know a little bit more about your issues with access. What do you think, besides the Miracle Mile, the reservoir itself, what kinds of negative impacts do you think will happen as a result of the construction and some of the other things?
Shouldn't have turned it off, Chairman, Senator. Yes, absolutely. So there has been some attempt at addressing things, everything from dust control, noise, but the road impacts are a little bit difficult to mitigate. As you guys saw, the underground facilities are going to be enormous. There's a lot of rock to move that is going to require a lot of trucks, a lot of people, everyone coming in. So I think we will do our best, whether they're coming from north or south, to work with the company and mitigate that, but I just don't see a way around it being a lot of people, a lot of impact. There has been some movement of the spoils pile was initially directly across from the state park. That has been moved a bit. So there's progress in the right direction, but I won't say that it's fully suited yet. As far as visitation too, we are one of the lower visited parks, but I think that most of our visitors would tell you that that is some of the beauty of that area, is that you can go to get away. And again, it being a launch point for so many other acres of public lands access. That's a little bit out of state parks purview, of course, but it's something that through the Office of Outdoor Recreation, we try to manage and be aware of.
Thank you. Committee, any other questions of state parks? Seeing none, really appreciate your comments, state parks. Next, I'm going to go to Bureau of Land Management and their representative. And I apologize for not talking to you earlier and welcome you, but I'm sure many of my colleagues know you, and I introduce yourself, please, for the committee, and we're looking forward to hearing from you.
Good morning, Chairman Byron, Chairman Landon, representatives of the committee. Thank you for having us here this morning. My name is Chris Kirby. I am the Associate State Director for BLM Wyoming, and I'll allow my coworker to introduce himself.
Chairman Byron, Chairman Landon, members of the committee, my name is Brad Purdy. I'm the Senior Advisor for BLM Wyoming.
Welcome, please proceed.
Thank you. So in the interest of time, I'm going to mostly walk through just the process to date that we worked with FERC, and then the process that BLM will be required to follow going forward. So in January of 2023, Plus Hydro filed for a license with FERC to construct and operate the Seminole Pump Storage Project. The proposed project would involve construction across a mix of public and private lands, as you all know. It involves approximately 1,025 acres of BLM managed land, 77 acres managed by the Bureau of Reclamation, and 830 acres of private land. FERC, as mentioned, FERC did release the draft environmental impact statement last fall. Meetings were held in Rawlins and Cheyenne in November of 2025. I think other speakers have commented on those meetings. And in December, the applicant submitted a project design alternative known as Alternative D, and along with updated plans and a technical memo to FERC. It was described as the applicant's preferred alternative for construction staging, spoil placement, and related temporary construction areas. Alternative D was not fully analyzed as part of the draft EIS, And public comment on this EIS was originally set to be closed January 2nd. FERC did extend this public comment period to February 13th. The extension was partially done to provide stakeholders the necessary time to review this alternative D. Because of the draft comment period extension, FERC did notify BLM in March that they plan to shift the milestone target dates for the issuance of the final EIS from April to June. So that'll be issued June 12th, 2026, which is a 60-day delay. This shift also affects BLM milestones. BLM has initiated Section 106 consultation with the State Historic Preservation Office, with consultation anticipated to conclude next February. If BLM decides to authorize the project, a right-of-way may be issued in April of 2027. And I'm saying this all, this is tentative scheduling and planning going forward. So none of these decisions have been made. These dates are not yet reflected on the FAST 41 dashboard, and they remain subject to coordination with FERC and other cooperating agencies. If the project's components on public lands are to be authorized, the BLM would need to complete a record of decision for the proposed right-of-way and a resource management plan amendment to address elements that are not in conformance with the current RMP. The ROD would tier to the FERC EIS, and additionally, a memorandum of agreement will be needed to comply with BLM's Section 106 obligations for mitigating adverse effects to historic properties. So the next steps for BLM include a need to determine whether to pursue the resource management plan amendment to address the identified non-conformance issues on public lands. So 3 of those key items, and one of them has been discussed previously by Director Bruce. Obviously, the big game, crucial winter range, year-round construction, it conflicts with seasonal protections for mule deer, bighorn sheep. The RMP amendment would permit BLM to evaluate these potential waivers or modifications to big game seasonal protections. But in doing so, BLM would consult with Wyoming Game and Fish to make this actual determination. So that's a key note for, that people should know about the process. One of the other nonconformance issues is the visual resource management. So this project is currently located in a Class 2 visual resource management area, which is intended to retain natural landscape characteristics. So the project, if the project was approved, that would change the visual resource management class of the area. And thirdly, old growth forest. The project will remove and permanently impact old growth forest stands, which the RMP directs BLM to maintain and enhance, and specifically this is related to limber pine habitat. So key issues. So if we do determine to do an RMP amendment, BLM may continue as a cooperating agency, rely on FERC's final environmental impact statement to support decisions, require additional analysis if the final EIS is not sufficient, or deny the right-of-way application if it cannot be brought into conformance with the approved land use plan. So again, all of these things are the options for us going forward as we continue to evaluate the project. So key upcoming milestones include the anticipated release of the EIS in June, a FERC decision currently targeted for July, and a BLM record of decision anticipated in April. And we'd be happy to answer any questions the committee may have.
Thank you, Ms. Kirby. Committee, any questions of Ms. Kirby? Senator Hicks, please.
Chairman, Assistant Director Kirby, could you just walk us through the process for the RMP amendment? So you can't, you'd have to go out and scope that, as I understand, or is the scope already defined because of the FERC final EIS? And walk us through that process. And I think the public process is you'll have to advertise, there's a certain period of time, then you have to write a record of decision, that's appealable. So give us the time frame for all of that to start happening. Let's assume that we have a final EIS and that's out in July. And then you make a determination that it requires an RMP amendment. So what happens then with your agency, and give us some timeframes, if you would, please.
Please.
Thank you. So, and I'll also refer to my coworker in case I missed some key milestones, but you're absolutely correct. So we will use the FERC EIS to the extent that we can. That's part of the larger FAST 41 with energy projects. We're supposed to keep permitting moving quickly. So we will use that EIS to the extent we can. But yes, we will have to go out for public scoping. There are required comment periods around that. And then we will have to issue a draft. Under the new NEPA regs, there's not necessarily public comment is not required when we release a draft EIS out to the public. So we don't have to do a public comment period. We often decide based on public interest, local interest, or interest from state and local government. Sometimes we will push to have that public comment period. Guessing by the interest on this one, I'm guessing that we will probably end up having to do that. And then that will be a 30-day process. Then there's a 60-day protest period, and there will be a 30-day governor's consistency review. 90? governance consistency. Thank you. 90-day governance consistency review, sorry. And so we will be under, an expedited timeline to complete the ROD, but yes, we'll have to go through all of those stages. So we won't be doing this in the dark, right? We'll go through a very large public process, do the public scoping. We'll focus obviously just on the areas that need to be amended, not an entire RMP amendment, but and I can't do all that math in my head right now, but our target is April 2027.
Thank you, Ms. Kirby. Please, Senator Hicks.
When you go through this process, you talk about the ROD. So range of alternatives, how do you determine what those range of alternatives are? And then you make a decision and you'll make a decision that is consistent to amend the RMP, to allow the FERC EIS to then move forward and then go to construction. Or let's assume that you decide that it's too onerous or contrary to the purpose of what the Bureau of Land Management's doing, and you say, we choose not to amend, but give us the range of alternatives and how you're going to choose those. And again, what's that public process and defining what that range of alternatives that will be considered for the RMP amendment? That's what I really want to get to.
Please.
Thank you for the question. Yeah, and thank you for focusing on that key piece I missed. So one of the things we'll do in public scoping is coordinate with the cooperators and work with the cooperators to develop the range of alternatives. So obviously we'd have a no action alternative, which would be no amendment. And then we probably have the proposed action, which would be the action we're talking about today. And then some other, 1 to 2 more alternatives, so we have a reasonable range. But the key piece is in consultation with our cooperators. And I mean, as I mentioned, we'll definitely be consulting with Wyoming Game and Fish on the Crucial Winter Range piece. And so that whole cooperator input will be incredibly important for the development of the actual range of alternatives. Thank you for focusing me in the right direction.
Please, Senator Hicks, go ahead.
Operators, so if you're not a cooperating agency or a cooperator with FERC, but because this is a BLM action, anybody could then file for anybody that's eligible could come in and ask for cooperating agency status on the amendment of the RMP. Is that correct?
Thank you for the question. So it's state agencies, cooperating agencies are limited to state and local government, and you have a specific MOA in place about who is eligible to be a cooperating agency. So it's not NGOs or just, a group, somebody creates a group off the street. No. So the opportunity then for the public to participate and other organizations to participate will be during that public comment period when the public scoping goes out. Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Kirby. Mr. Purdy, anything to add there? Appreciate you being here. I want to give you if we can get that turned on. There you go.
No, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Committee, any questions of Senator Schuler, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one quick one. When I read the draft EIS, I noticed I think there's something like over 300 acres that's going to be temporarily disturbed. And I understand that when they disturb it, they have to put it back eventually. But I didn't see anything in there about road construction. Will there be new roads that are you aware of? Or is that something you guys have a purview over?
Ms. Kirby?
Thank you. Yes, to my knowledge, there will be roads, especially for construction.
Thank you, committee. Any other questions? Senator Hicks, one more.
One more, Mr. Chairman. Under cooperating agency, tribes could be a cooperating agency. Is that correct on the RMP amendment?
Ms. Kirby?
Thank you, Chairman.
Either?
I'm going to refer to.
Phone a friend?
Something to say. No. Oh. Yes, but we also would normally consult with it. Also, we have to do tribal consultation.
All right, thank
so
you.
as a separate part of the process.
Yes, please, Senator Jones.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry to follow up on Senator Hicks' question. Are we as state legislators considered cooperators?
Ms. Kirby?
Thank you. No, you're not.
I thought we weren't, but I wanted to clarify that.
Thank
Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome.
Hey, appreciate you folks being here today. It is 9:10, our last one until we take our required break. Sorry, it is 10:19. Whoa. I need a break. That's dyslexia at its finest. Yeah, let's go ahead and go to the BOR. And you've been patiently waiting. Appreciate you being here for the committee. Please introduce yourself. clearly state your name, and we'll give you a few minutes here. And then for everyone online and everyone in the room, it is our goal to have a little break here in a moment, and we will have a strict break, let me tell you, and then we'll be back at it. So please welcome to House TRW.
Thank you, Chairman. My name is Lyle Myler. I'm the area manager for the Bureau of Reclamation. Reclamation has several facilities on the North Platte River. We have 7 dams, 6 power plants. Seminole and Cordis are our facilities, which will be influenced by the pump storage project. So Reclamation's interest is to protect our existing operation of facilities, Seminole and Cordis reservoirs, as well as downstream reservoirs. Seminole Reservoir provides a water supply for our Casper Alcova Irrigation District. That's also a federally constructed facility that's operated and maintained via transferred works agreement with the Casper Alcova Irrigation District. So our principal interest is to ensure that those operations can continue and that the pump storage operations will be consistent with Reclamation's operations in the basin. So as previously mentioned, Reclamation has a lease of power privilege agreement that will be needed as we progress further with the project, that will outline those conditions, terms and conditions, to ensure the pump storage operations are consistent with Reclamation operations on the North Platte. We've been involved in the process as far as coordination activities. We've found R+ Hydro to be very accommodating to meet our needs. One quick example is their original design for a spillway was to discharge into Cordis Reservoir, which is a much smaller body of water than Seminole. Our concern was that that would potentially wash debris from the mountainside into the reservoir, which would impact operations and potentially power generation from our Cordis power plant. R+ Hydro was moved the location of that spillway to an alternate site to discharge into Seminole Reservoir, which is a much larger body. So we've been participating in the process. Reclamation has offered comments on the draft EIS and will be continuing to work and be involved in the project. We've had, in addition to the lease of power privileges agreement, which we will be working on in the future, R+ Hydro has approached Reclamation as far as being able to have space in Seminole Reservoir to hold their water while they cycle it back and forth to their upper reservoir, and as well as water for initial fill of that reservoir and replacement of evaporative losses on an annual basis. So that's additional actions that we're working with R+ Hydro on. I'd just like to take a minute and note the expertise of the state and other agencies involved, and the reliance that Reclamation will have on FERC licensing permit and the environmental impact statement that they do. And that's a quick summary. I'll open for questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Myler. Committee, looks like we're going to have a few. I'm going to start at this side. Representative Harshman. Oh, Representative Thayer, please.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Myler.
Myler, yes.
Myler, for being here, and I appreciate the Bureau's expertise. Again, I'm going to, similar question that I had before, Mr. Chairman, is the pre-existing concrete cancer or the alkali silica reaction that we're having on Seminole Dam, what precautions and mitigation is being taken place? And then also the 2 active fault lines that the dam is near. So I guess if you can address those 2 questions, I'd appreciate it.
Okay.
Mr. Myler,
Mr. Chair, there is Reclamation has been studying over a series of the last few years. When the dam was originally constructed, there was material in the aggregate that caused this aggregate silica reaction that weakens the bonds between the cement particles and that aggregate. We've got an ongoing investigation where we look at the strength of the contract. We actually core and test the strength in those cores of the dam. Reclamation is also pursuing, we've done some seismic type studies and some test pits in the vicinity to look at faults. That study is ongoing. We're in the process of continuing and completing those studies, which will likely be in the next few years that those will be completed. And at that point, looking at potential risks or corrective actions that need to take place at Seminole Dam, that will be something that Reclamation through our dam safety program will take a look and address that at the time that we have that information available.
Thank you, Mr. Myler. Committee, anything else down here? You good? Okay. Senator Hicks?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, thanks for coming today. A question I have is just about the original fill and then the water rights associated with this and how the Bureau would operate. But one of the things, and I'm sure you're aware, most of us, when we went through the Pathfinder modification study here on the North Platte, that was to replace the 30,000 acre foot of lost storage and Pathfinder. Have we got any bathymetric surveys of Seminole to find out how much of that reservoir capacity is currently lost, how that's accredited to those current accounts, that lost capacity, and then how adding this additional user plus that additional 13,000 acre feet is going to affect all of those water right holders in Seminole Reservoir. So how are we going to balance this knowing that we have first question was, do we have any bathymetric surveys on Seminole to know what the lost storage capacity is in there? And if we don't, how would we go about attributing the loss to each one of those accounts within the reservoir? And then we're adding another user onto the system.
Okay, so Mr. Chair, in response, there are some older bathymetric surveys, but we don't have anything currently. Reclamation is the process of going through and doing bathymetric surveys to explore sedimentation loss on several of our reservoirs, and Seminole is slated for the future. Exactly when that will new survey will occur, I'm not sure at this point. With regard to Seminole Reservoir, we have the primary water. Reclamation holds the water right. So we built the facility. We have the water right with the state engineer's office. There is a secondary permit associated with that water stored in Seminole, which allocates the water we store under our water right to the Casper Cove Irrigation District. So we have other arrangements, and the arrangements we'd have with the pump storage folks would be our Seminole Reservoir is not full 100% of the time. So we have excess capacity space. So the relationship we'd have with the pump storage folks we'd have a contract with them for a portion of that space, say whatever they needed to cycle the reservoir back and forth, say 14,000 acre foot of space in the reservoir, which would not affect the existing Reclamation's right to store that water and deliver to the Casper Cove Irrigation District. So it would be space, their water would be held in that space, they'd cycle it back and forth. If we were to get to the point where we'd fill that reservoir completely up, there would be provisions in that contract that any water they had in that excess capacity space, if there wasn't excess capacity, would be pass downstream and they'd have to have some sort of arrangement to recoup that when we had space to restore water for their use.
Senator?
For the state engineer, and he's not on, it's about the new water right filing so
Good.
Semino's full, and then we have another reservoir up here we're gonna fill
Okay.
also.
Committee, any other
Different
questions?
question.
Any other down here? I know, I'm gonna get there. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. I'm gonna start with Representative Harshman and then Representative Storr.
Go ahead.
Nope, Representative Harshman, you're up.
Director Myler, thanks for being here in your service. Just a question on all the, the generation capacity of these dams here in the North Platte. And this project, just looking at the handout, was, I think, 2,900 annual gigawatts. I'm looking, I think that was, is there opportunities in our current infrastructure, since 1939 dams, to really upgrade that could, surpass even that amount without really any impact to the environment? I mean, do we have more room for capacity to generate in our current system? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative Harshman. Mr. Myler is quickly shuffling through his papers. We'll give him a moment here.
So with regard to power generation on the North Platte River system, we have 3 generating units at Seminole Power Plant that generates, has a nameplate capacity of 51 megawatts. At Cordis, we have 3 units for 36 megawatts. Fremont Canyon is our biggest power plant that sits above Alcova Reservoir. That's 67 roughly megawatts. Alcova, 36 megawatts. Glendale, 39 megawatts. And Guernsey is our smallest for 6.4 megawatts. So in perspective, if you add all those, you come out to about 240 megawatt capability of generation without additional infrastructure. That's kind of what our limited ability as far as generating potential, our capacity for generation on the North Platte River system, either a new dam or in the past, Reclamation has done activities where we've replaced turbine runners, upgraded our units so that we've made some small improvements to those generating capabilities, but it would be relatively small gains in power generation.
Thank you, Representative Harshman. Thank you, Mr. Myler. Representative Storr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Director Myler. I'm curious if you've got any data showing kind of overall the flows into Seminole over the last 25 years from the upper North Platte, and whether there's, a trend going down generally, since that seems to be what's happening, and whether there's any concerns with the project as a result. Thanks.
Mr. Myler.
Chairman, yes, we have lots of inflow records. So let me just start quickly. The basin above Seminole is mostly snow-driven from snowmelt runoff. So snowpack plays an important role on the inflows. And 70% or more of the inflows into Seminole come in the 4 months, April through July. So I'm gonna talk about volumes of water into Seminole, April through July. So if you take a look at history, and what we see is it kind of ebbs and flows approximately about every 10 years or so. So you had a period in 83, 84 where we had high inflows. We had spills over the ungated spillway at Pathfinder, followed by some low water years in the 90s, early 90s, 89 to 90. Then again, we had record inflows that occurred in 2011. Average in the basin is around 700,000 acre foot in those 4 months. In 2011, we had a record inflow of 1.9 million acre foot in those 4 months. 2002 was our record low inflow, which was only 118,000 acre foot. So you can see that in just 10 years, from 2002 to 2010, we had 118,000 versus 1.9 million. So the system is very variable as far as the snow and inflow. Then in immediately following 2011, where we had record inflows, we had a low inflow of about 268,000. So we went from 1.9 million down to 268,000. We had, in that continued trend in 2013, we had, I think it was right around 350,000 acre foot, which is half of what we average get. Then we've had some good years. This year is a drought condition for reclamation as far as inflows. Our forecast was 130,000 acre foot, very similar to 2002. But it looks like we are likely to get that 130 to 150,000 acre foot. So right now we're looking at a period of concerning inflows with drought conditions. So the question is how long will that persist before it turns around and we have some more higher inflows years? So as far as a trend of decreasing inflows, I can't predict the future on that one.
Thank you, Mr. Myler. Any other questions, committee? Seeing none. Representative Storr, quick follow-up, and then I have one question, and then we're gonna go to break.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Perhaps a question for Mr. Baker, but I believe he recognized that these weren't new water rights, but acquisition water rights somewhere in the basin. Is that correct?
We are, Mr. Myler, we're going to keep to the current presenter.
Okay.
If you don't want to answer that,
No, I will.
Okay.
From the standpoint of water rights, the relationship that reclamation would have with the R+ Hydro for their initial fill of that reservoir, we would have a contract and they would purchase water from us. That contract would be provided to the state engineer's office. They would recognize and protect that storage delivery from reclamation to R+ Hydro for their purpose. So it's really wouldn't affect the existing water rights. It would be a contractual arrangements between reclamation and R+ Hydro that would be recognized by the state engineer's office.
Thank you, Mr. Myler. Quickly, do you have any concerns of your current infrastructure in and around that area and how future replacement of some of that infrastructure? And you mentioned that you have a study going on with one of your dams right now with some chemical reactions, but do you have any concerns on potential replacement of any of the infrastructure around there and how that could affect if you take some of this offline, for a number of years, if you were to have to replace something? The legislature is pretty sensitive to dam replacement right now, given some of the conversations that have been going on for 3 decades, but I would love to hear your thoughts on the current life expectancy of some of the infrastructure specifically close to this project.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, like I mentioned before, we have ongoing studies and analysis with regard to the concrete of the dam. There is concern with the top layers of the dam with that reaction and potential seismic concerns on that. Our seismic study is underway and we should have some results for that. The results of that, reclamation will take a look at seismic loading with regard to the condition of the concrete and do an analysis as far as risk analysis. And we have our dam safety office will look at the risks and depending on the level of those risks, our next step would go into a corrective action study. That corrective action study would look at ways to remediate those risks and have a whole host of alternatives, which I have, until we get to that stage, it would be premature for me to speculate on what those actions may be and, or durations of time that the reservoir could be drawn down to complete those corrective actions type thing.
Thank you, Mr. Myler, for that. Committee, sensing your need for a break and mine too. I really appreciate your time today. I really appreciate everyone's testimony this morning. It is 10:39. I am going to come back and convene at 10:50. So 11 minutes. I'm going to be strict to that time frame. Please quickly use the restroom, grab a drink. And just so agencies know, I'm going to go to our state electeds, local electeds, and then public comment, which I think will go from about 10:15 to 12:30. So please consider that. We'll be back here in about 10 minutes. Thank you. We'll get going again. I do apologize. I overlooked our good friends from the Department of Environmental Quality, and I was just trying to get ahead of myself a little bit. So with that, that'll be our last state agency, and then we're going to go into some local government agency perspectives. So with that, please introduce yourselves for the committee and welcome to House TRW. Joint TRW, sorry, my colleagues.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Todd Parfit, Director of the Department of Environmental Quality. And with me is Jennifer Zygmunt, who is the Administrator for the Water Quality Division. Just want to say that we've had an involvement with the Seminole project over the last 4+ years. And that involvement includes not just the 401 certification, but also includes being a cooperator with the EIS or the draft EIS and providing comments on that to FERC, and also industrial siting. With industrial siting, we determined that the project was jurisdictional under the Industrial Siting Act back in 2022. And so the project will have to obtain an industrial siting permit from the agency. But I just want to point out, the industrial siting permit is not one that's issued by the agency. There's an industrial siting council that actually issues that permit. And the important thing about the industrial siting process, the agencies that you've heard from today, in addition to that, there are a total of 19 agencies that weigh in on the project through the state process of industrial siting. And then there's the 401 certification. There's been a lot of discussion around that, and I'm going to turn that over to Administrator Zygmunt to give you a background on that and how we came to the conclusions that we did.
Thank you, Ms. Zygmunt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Pleased to be here today. As Director Parfit said, the Water Quality Division's primary role in the Seminole Pump Storage Project has been the issuance of the Section 401 certification. That's not a permit that we've talked to the legislature much about, so just real quickly, that refers to Section 401 of the Clean Water Act, which gives states authority to review discharges from federally permitted or licensed projects. And it gives the states the opportunity to make sure that those projects will comply with the state's water quality standards. It's a direct grant of authority from Congress to states so that we have the ability to make sure our standards are being protected by these projects. So it's a really important tool for us to make sure our water quality is protected. We typically issue about 100 401 certifications per year. By far, most of those are for U.S. Army Corps of Engineer dredge and fill permits. But Section 401 certifications also apply to licenses under FERC. In Section 401 certifications, we have the authority to include conditions that will protect our water quality. These conditions become enforceable requirements in the federal permit or license. So we don't issue a permit ourselves, but we issue conditions that go into the federal permit or license. But with 401, it's really important to keep in mind that we can only include conditions related to protecting water quality standards. So the certification that we issued, the adaptive management plan that's part of that certification has to do with protecting water quality standards. We're not able to incorporate things that have to do with terrestrial wildlife. There's other aspects of fisheries management and habitat that if it's not related to a water quality standard, we can't include it within the condition. We have to stay within the confines of the Clean Water Act and the authority we're given. So as you know, because the project requires a hydropower license from FERC and will also require Section 404 dredge and fill permit for Army Corps, they do need to get a 401 certification from us. And as you heard, and as I'm sure you're aware, we did issue that certification on March 5th of this year. This did follow working with the company for over 4 years in reviewing the project and potential impacts to water quality. The issuance of our certification also followed our review of public comments that we received during an extended public comment period. And during that public comment period, we hosted 2 public meetings. We don't have to do public meetings for 401 certifications, but we were certainly aware of the interest in this project. So we extended the public comment period to twice what it normally is and held 2 public meetings just to make sure people had access to us to provide information on the project and make sure that there wasn't any information we had missed. Again, we began discussions with Black Canyon Hydro R+ about water quality requirements for this project in 2022. When they submitted their application for a FERC license in early 2023, we reviewed that and determined that more work was needed. It wasn't sufficient for us to do our jobs to protect water quality. So we requested that FERC require additional water quality studies. FERC did approve that request and required that R+ conduct additional studies to show how it would protect our water quality standards. So they worked over the next 2 years to meet that requirement through data analysis, modeling, and adaptive management. We did work closely with them during that process to make sure our requirements were met. We had the opportunity to thoroughly review their work at every step, and there was extensive communication. I think we met weekly with them or bi-weekly throughout this process. The evaluation focused on ensuring compliance with our water quality standards in all 3 water bodies, Seminole, Cortez, and the North Platte River Miracle Mile. It's important to note that the Miracle Mile is designated in our rules as an outstanding resource water. We previously called these Class 1 waters. It's just a different name now. But we are required under regulations to protect those waters to their quality that existed at the time they were designated as outstanding resource waters. In this case, it was 1979 for the Miracle Mile. So we have to protect it to the conditions, the quality that existed at that time. This is the highest level of surface water quality protection that we have in our regulations. We take that responsibility to protect those waters very seriously. The project was evaluated for potential effects on temperature, dissolved oxygen, pH, nutrients, suspended sediment, and metals in all of those water bodies. That was evaluated under both normal and maximum operations and across a range of hydrologic and operational conditions. As you heard from Mr. Baker this morning, the evaluation used a widely used process-based water quality model called CE-QualW2, coupled with sediment resuspension analyses. So those were the 2 main tools that were used as part of this project. And again, as R+ did that work, there's extensive communication and oversight from us. The analyses showed that water quality standards would be met, except for 2 manageable water quality risks during project operations. You heard about those this morning, but just to summarize those real quickly. First, the analyses show that there could be short-term marginal exceedances of the temperature criterion that's protective of cold water aquatic life in the Miracle Mile. Again, our standards establish that anthropogenic pollution can't increase temperature more than 1.1 degrees Celsius when ambient water temperatures are above 15.6 degrees Celsius in surface waters. The analysis showed that the project has the potential to exceed that by a very minor amount, 0.1 degrees Celsius, for a very short period in the late summer, fall, about 13 days, about once every 10 years. Secondly, the analysis showed that there could be limited sediment resuspension in Seminole Reservoir during project startup that could potentially cause a short-term increase in suspended sediment in the Miracle Mile. And this indicated as a worst-case scenario that project startup could resuspend 771 cubic feet of bed sediment in the reservoir in proximity to the inlet-outlet structure. That resuspended volume represents less than 0.5% of the natural sediment load coming into the reservoir. So again, a very small amount, but worst-case scenario, there could be turbidity that's seen down in the Miracle Mile. So, as you heard, part of our 401 certification is an adaptive management plan that includes thresholds to prevent those risks and to address those risks. Adaptive management is a framework based on real-time monitoring data and defined thresholds for reservoir water elevation, water temperature, and turbidity. I do want to make sure that when we're talking about the adaptive management plan, the committee knows to look at the plan that was approved as part of our 401 certification. This is what becomes an enforceable part of the certification. The adaptive management plan that was included in the EIS, the draft EIS that went out for public comment, was the original version. A lot of work has been done on that original version, so please be sure to refer to the one dated February 2026. That's the one that will be in effect. So again, the adaptive management plan has specific thresholds that trigger operational restrictions and protective measures designed to prevent exceedances of the standards before they occur. Simply put, if these thresholds are exceeded, the operations must be reduced to make sure that we stay within water quality standards. So as you heard this morning, this is proactive, not reactive. We're not waiting until there's an exceedance. We set those thresholds earlier to make sure there is not an exceedance. For temperature, as you heard, there's thresholds in order to make sure that the Miracle Mile is protected. The key threshold in the adaptive management plan is that there is a threshold below which, if Seminoe Reservoir drops below a certain elevation threshold, the company would be required to reduce operations by about 50% during that operating period to make sure we're not having an impact on the Miracle Mile. The model that we looked at, the primary driver of temperature in the Miracle Mile is the water elevation in Seminoe Reservoir. If we protect that, we're going to be able to protect the Miracle Mile. So that threshold, the elevation threshold in the adaptive management plan is very important. It doesn't matter the why. If Seminoe Reservoir drops below that level due to drought, if we see increasing low water years, if it drops below that level, R+ would be required to reduce operational capacity for that time period. Second, we're looking at real-time temperature data in the Miracle Mile. We use the full data set that we have on the Miracle Mile to understand what its historical condition is. And that data set is pretty significant. We've been monitoring on that segment, USGS has for a long time, so we have a good handle on what that temperature needs to be. So the second protective threshold is if we start to see temperatures in the Miracle Mile getting outside the normal range. And again, the thresholds would be before there's an exceedance. If we start to see it increasing, then operations might need to be reduced further. So those are the two primary safeguards in the adaptive management plan, watching the water level in Seminoe Reservoir and then keeping an eye on temperature in the Miracle Mile. For the sediment resuspension and turbidity, the adaptive management plan establishes turbidity thresholds in the Miracle Mile as well. And again, it's only under worst case scenarios that we think we would see a turbidity increase in the Miracle Mile. But if we do start to see increases, then the adaptive management plan allows us to require R+ to bring the project on more slowly in a more phased approach so that we stay below turbidity thresholds in the Miracle Mile. Again, another key point of the adaptive management plan is that it requires real-time monitoring in both the Miracle Mile and the Seminoe Reservoir for temperature, dissolved oxygen, and turbidity. Again, this is a critical piece of the plan to make sure that we know what's going on and can protect water quality standards. As you heard, it requires regular coordination with my division, annual data analysis, monthly reporting, and a submission of an annual report. So we'll have close oversight of the project. We do have authority to modify the adaptive management plan components at any time based on report findings. So again, as we get more data, if we find that something is not being protective, we have the authority to modify the adaptive management plan and the 401 certification in general with agreement from the federal agency. As you heard, based on comments we received during public notice, we did require that R+ collects 2 more years of baseline data before construction to improve the data set used in the model. That will help, again, prove the model and its results. And if the results from these 2 years of data show that changes need to be made, again, we can modify the adaptive management plan. I do want to speak quickly to the years of data that the model used. We talked a lot, you heard a lot about 2013 to 2016. That's the best data set that we have where we have both data on the Miracle Mile and the Seminoe Reservoir. We have a lot of data on the Miracle Mile, not so much in Seminoe. But in order to run the model, we need both. We need to know how Seminoe is affecting the Miracle Mile. So that's the best data set that we had when we had paired data and representing a range of hydrologic conditions, as you heard, a moderate drought year up to a more wet year. Real quickly, the certification, I'll just call out some other high points. It includes enforceable conditions to protect downstream public water supply intakes, to minimize fish entrainment, protect water quality during construction, and reduce impacts from utility bridge and culvert crossings. Again, we have flexibility with 401 certifications to work with the federal agency over time to amend the certification if needed. So again, because we determined that the project will comply with water quality standards, that any risks from the project could be handled with adaptive management, we issued the 401 certification in March. With 401 certifications, we have 4 options. We can grant certification. We can grant certification with conditions, which is what we typically do. We can waive our certification authority, which I don't think we've ever done, or we can deny certification. If we deny certification, we have to have a very specific and substantive reason as to how the project will not meet water quality standards. And then we have to give the applicant another opportunity to resubmit an application and address those deficiencies. Mr. Chairman, I think that concludes my remarks about the 401 certification. I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Sigmund and committee. We are, as the good co-chair reminded me, going to be pushing it pretty tight on time. So if DEQ has any more comments, I'd be happy to take them, but I'd certainly love to open up to the committee for questions. And then local electeds, there are some open chairs up here. If you're planning on making some comments and you're local elected or state elected, please come fill this front row so we can get moving as soon as we're moving forward from DEQ. Committee, any questions? Senator Hicks, or sorry, do you have anything else to add before I go to questions?
Mr. Chairman, no, we're ready to answer.
Perfect. Thank you. Senator Hicks.
Real quick, Mr. Chairman. So on the 401 water quality certification was basically done on the proposed action that was presented to the department. Correct. But then there was a supplemental alternative B. Was that analyzed as part of the 401 certification? So the second part of the question is, what's the penalty associated for not complying with section 401?
Mr. Chairman, both good questions. So I'll start with the last one. Enforcement authority for the federal license or permit would rest with the federal agency, meaning if a project didn't comply with conditions of the license or permit, it's up to the federal agency to enforce. However, in all cases, we retain authority to take action if our water quality standards are violated. So if we see a project where there is a violation based on turbidity levels or temperature levels, if we can prove that it exceeds our standards, then we have enforcement authority as well. To answer your first question, correct, the application for the FERC license is what triggers the 1-year reasonable period of time for us to review and issue the 401 certification. We did take a look at alternative D, and it did not change any of the analysis of the 401 certification, and it changed any aspects of the project that would affect our certification. So we did not provide any further comments at that time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Hicks. Committee, any other questions of our? Yep. Mr. Co-Chairman, please.
Mr. Co-Chairman, thank you. And really appreciate your report. Thank you for all of that. You mentioned monitoring if that's required. You can require monitoring. Is that going to be your people doing that? Okay, that's.
I'm sorry,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Chairman. That was not my response. I apologize. To answer that, it will not be my staff doing that monitoring. It will be USGS doing that monitoring. But it will be real-time data, so we will have access as that data becomes available on their website to view the data.
Representative Connolly, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're talking about being able to go in and modify, or if they're not meeting their requirements, that you can address that. But what's the time frame between? Because there's got to be a pretty good process there. So if the turbidity or the temperature, you discover that's not what it should be, then how long, what's a time frame where that just continues until you can get a handle on it and stop that problem?
Mr. Chairman, again, what's a strong point about this monitoring with USGS doing real-time monitoring is that those results are available pretty quickly. So R+ will have access to that data. If they start seeing something go above one of the thresholds, they would be required to notify us. Likewise, we will have access to that data in a pretty short order of time so that we can keep an eye on that data. So we should know pretty quickly if there is a water quality parameter that's getting outside one of those thresholds.
Thank you, Representative Connolly. Committee, any other questions? Seeing none from either side. One more crack at it. Thank you. Any further comments? No? Okay, really appreciate that. I'll go ahead and just take it in order if we want to move from your left to your right. And if the state engineer does want to speak, feel free to come up. Don't want to put you on the hot seat unexpectedly, but we're going to head into county commissioners. Representative Riggins, if you'd like to speak, please come on up. And any other representatives or senators I'm missing. But with that, just to make everyone once again aware of time, 11:13, there's a lot of our constituents behind you and in front of me that have taken time out of their day. So I want to make sure to get to them. But welcome. Great to have so many county commissioners here. And please introduce yourself and remind us where you're from.
I feel like we're having a commissioner meeting here today. There's so many of us. So that tells you how important it is to everybody. So anyway, I'm Dave North. I'm one of the county commissioners here in Natrona County. And just for the background, I've got an extensive environmental and safety background. I've actually got a degree in wildlife and fishery biology, worked for the state, worked for federal governments, worked for myself for several years. And so I'm not just speaking as a elected official, but also from my personal and professional experience. So the biggest thing I wanted to talk about is 10,800 acre feet getting turned over every 12 hours. That translates into 2.5 million gallons a minute, or 7.5 billion gallons every 12 hours. That's a lot of water. And when you start taking it out of the depths, right there close to where the dam is, the intake and the discharge point, there's not much way that you're not going to affect the thermocline that's in that reservoir. That's going to affect the fisheries. It's going to, I mean, whether it increases the turbidity or not, it will increase it or change the temperature level. It'll eliminate that static level, because water temperatures at 38 degrees, that's when water is the heaviest. That's when it settles down. As it gets lighter or warmer, it moves to the top, or colder, it moves to the top. So those are all things that you have to take into consideration. And I realize that the legislators are not part of the group that can actually make a decision, but it is something that is important to come from our state as far as how important it is. The other thing, that sheep herd that's down there, that's the healthiest sheep herd we have in the entire state. That's difficult to come by anymore with pneumonia and everything else. It's just like the Whiskey Mountain sheep herd that we had up there, and all the issues that we had associated with pneumonia and everything else. That's something we need to make sure that we protect. We need to make sure that that is something, because that's not just a benefit for the hunters. It's a benefit for the state in general, all the way across the board. When you start having that population, it's just like if you're raising livestock or something else, you want to protect your breeding herds. You want to protect the safe ones. And that's a critical area. That's a critical winter range for that. Sheep do not take very kindly to having disturbance in their area. They get sick, they die. And so that's something that needs to be taken into consideration. Everything downstream, I'm not going to repeat everything that everybody else has already said today. I know you're short on time, and I appreciate that. But one other thing that was not and has not been brought up is the sheer level of water drop, and the water being dropped and raised in Seminole Reservoir with this. You start pumping in and out that much water every day, you will never have a stable ice cap. It's going to drop. So for safety reasons, for the wildlife that cross that reservoir, for the fishermen that go out there, there's repeated cases around the country. I can think of Blue Mesa Reservoir back in the 70s. They lost 240 elk in one day because they fell through the ice. When you start raising and dropping the level of that ice across there, that's a very high probability for safety reasons. So it's not just for the wildlife, it's not just for the fisheries, but it's also for the safety
of our citizens that we have in the state that like to go out and enjoy the outdoor recreation. With that, I will be happy to take any questions. I said, I don't want to repeat everything that's already been said today. You guys hear enough of that stuff as it is.
Thank you, Commissioner North. Thank you for being here today. Really appreciate it. Committee, any questions of Commissioner North? Senator Hicks, please.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, when we looked at the EIS and the range that was covered by FERC, it didn't cover my understanding. The potential transfer of the travel and the impact in Natrona County and people moving from here back and forth, construction timing. Does that provide any concern for the county as far as road maintenance, dust, other issues? How are you going to deal with that? I mean, all that would come up in industrial siding. But that comes after this. And so if this happens, are you satisfied with the level of analysis to the impact of Natrona County that was done by FERC?
In short, no.
Thank you.
I think there's a lot of things. I think there's a lot of deficiencies in there that have not been addressed specifically. And I think those have to be addressed.
Thank you, Commissioner North. Committee, anything else? Okay, let's go ahead and fill the seats as you guys come up, and gals and electeds. When one leaves, fill the next seat. And just out of respect for our constituents, I am going to start holding to a bit of a tighter timeline. Each one, if you can please try to hold to about a 2-minute comment or less, that would be greatly appreciated. And if something's been said, you can quickly mention it, say ditto. That means a lot to us to kind of keep this ball rolling. And I'm sure there's an opportunity to submit public comment to LSO that we will all read. So with that, yeah, go ahead and fill the seats and let's just start going. Commissioner, please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Peter Nicolais, and I'm a Natrona County Commissioner. And I wanted to thank you for spending so much time on this today. I've been an attorney in Wyoming since 1997, and that's allowed me the privilege of representing clients in the energy industry and those impacted by energy projects. As part of that, I've represented clients participating in various local, state, and federal, permitting processes. And some of those clients have been on the development side and some have been on the impacted non-participating side. I've been through the Wyoming industrial siding process on Section 109 permit matters or permit applications a number of times, including as a participating landowner, but also as counsel. Most recently, my involvement with that process, the Wyoming industrial siding process, and other large industrial scale projects has been as a representative of local government. So today I'm speaking first as a county commissioner. Natrona County is concerned about the impacts of the Seminole pump storage project on our community. While the project's located in Carbon County, we are downstream from it. And in many respects, the county and the city of Casper and our other towns and municipalities and our community in general will be most heavily impacted by this project if it were to go through. When I talk to people about the attributes of Natrona County that are special and make this a special place, a lot of them point to that mountain that's right behind you and right in front of me. But a lot of them talk about the North Platte River, and a lot of them talk about the reservoirs and the reservoir system. We heard about the Casper Alcove Irrigation District. There are just a ton of great people who have small and medium-sized tracts, and they rely on irrigating out of this system during the irrigation season. But there are a lot of recreationalists also that use the river and use these reservoirs. And I would say, without overstating it, that the North Platte River is really part of the soul of our community and a large part of what makes it special and distinguishes it. Those resources, the reservoirs and our river, add tourism dollars, big tourism dollars every year. They also play a huge part in keeping our valuable neighbors here and our more valuable kids here. We're concerned that this project will basically not benefit our county, and Natrona County submitted a letter in December to FERC, basically saying that our position was that the project should not move forward if it threatens the viability and quality of the fisheries, and if it would cause other substantial negative impacts to the wildlife or to the health, safety, and welfare of the people of Natrona County.
We are at about 3.5 minutes there. We're going to try to keep it to 2 minutes. So for everyone listening, that's 3.5 minutes. So
Thank you. I've been trying to speak quickly, but I knew I was pushing the envelope, Mr. Chairman. I guess I would say that you've heard about open loop and closed loop systems, and I think that that's really the key here. When we've got an open loop system, we're basically taking advantage of the public's resources, the public's land in this case, the public's reservoir facilities, the public's water, and the public's wildlife. I think that's where this legislature can step in and do some good, whether it's through the Industrial Siting Act amendments or prohibiting open loop systems or requiring a bond or surety bond if some of these future impacts 20 years down the road might unintended impacts that are really substantially detrimental to our community. And, you know, if this is a $3 billion project, maybe that's 30% of the cost of the project is set aside, and we're able to talk about the utilization of those monies. So I'd encourage you to be careful about saying this is somebody else's job. This is the government's job. This is local government's job. This is DEQ's job. I think that from a macro and micro scale that this legislature has the greatest potential to do the greatest. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Commissioner. And I hate to cut you off there. I know I was giving you the dirty eyeball, but really appreciate your service, not only as a contributor to the wonderful state of Wyoming, but also to your community. Thank you for serving. With that, go ahead and we'll go to your left, my right, and go ahead and fill these chairs. I am going to keep to that 2 minute. And it's not, don't take any offense, but I really want to get to the rest of the public comment. So please introduce yourself and tell us who you represent.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Joe Parsons, Saratoga and Cameron-Rawlins Conservation District. We're a local government that this project falls in. I had a whole intro planned, but in the interest of time, I'm going to pass it off to Leanne Carell, who is one chair down to my right, is our NEPA coordinator. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Parsons, for that brief comment. Thank you for your service and your work you're doing. Please.
Committee,
We got
one of the, they got it on. Okay. Sorry about that. In the length of time that we have here, we as local governments and our Carbon County Commissioner partners with the Conservation District, we believe it was very important for you guys to hear a local perspective on it because, and you've heard a lot about the NEPA process and things. Well, I'm sure many of you know about the NEPA process as it comes to land management agencies. And that's what we're used to dealing with is land management agencies where we have a relationship built. It's more of a local, it's with the Forest Services with the BLM. Well, this is being led by FERC, which is the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, and they are not a local agency. They are not a land management agency. And the NEPA process has been much different, to say, and to put it mildly. We can all speak to that. So as local cooperating agencies, if you've got a sheet that we provided to the committee, and so with that, you can see that what's in the NEPA process, the traditional NEPA process includes state agencies in that. Well, because of FERC's process is much different, they have taken intervener status. So the local governments, both the Carbon County Commissioners and the Saratoga and Cameron-Rawlins Conservation District, the Medicine Bow Conservation District, we have taken the job of the local cooperating agencies and the cooperating agency status. With that, we have been very disappointed in what the response has been. The cooperating agency, just so that you know, the cooperating agency process has been much different. We have not been included in a lot of things. We've pointed to a lot of issues, had a lot of questions, and have not been responded to in a lot. So some of my comments that I'm going to have specifically may not be on this sheet, but are specifically to that process. As Joe Parsons, the district manager, said, I'm the NEPA coordinator. I'm a contractor, and that's my expertise.
We're at 2 minutes just to.
Okay, the expertise of the Conservation District is listed under state statutes covering a lot of different things. One of the things that with this project that hasn't been mentioned is it's an energy project, but it's a net user of energy. It's not a net producer of energy. It takes more energy to pump that water up the hill than it does that they gain by having it come down the hill. So looking at the state of Wyoming and energy projects, I think we need to look at efficiencies. And it was mentioned about the efficiencies with the Conservation District. I'm wrapping up. With the Conservation District, we look at water and we look at soils. We have major problems there. If you look in our document, you'll see some of the issues that we have with that pumping of that water over and over again really creates it. The fluctuation that was mentioned earlier, I want to follow up with that fluctuation that Commissioner North said. Where the water levels are at today, it would be a 22.8 or a 20.8 inch fluctuation daily. That is a health and safety concern. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, ma'am. If you're wrapped up, go ahead and free those seats up for our next comments. Please, Commissioner, and then I'll go to you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Co-Chair, Committee. John Espy, Carbon County, Wyoming Commissioner. I'll just kind of go more over the NEPA process that we're used to and with the new rules that are coming out. But I think this is kind of an exercise in how NEPA is not working for us. Most people think that when we have a NEPA document, when we come out, that it addresses all these issues. That's not the purpose of the National Environmental Policy Act. The purpose was the intent that we know what the cost is if we move forward. But with that is a county who will probably have to issue permits if this project does go forward. We depend on the process to ferret out a lot of the issues because we don't have the expertise, let alone the bandwidth to handle these. So we depend on the NEPA process and the industrial siting process to go through that. And that's where I think it's important that as proponents come through, and we need to probably work on this more, that they work with Wyoming Game and Fish and the other agencies to get these issues addressed before they drop their letter of intent for the NEPA process. And to move on, if this were to go forward, my quick calculations, if Carbon County got 2% of the industrial siting money that came, that would not be enough money to take care of the road issues that we will have because of this project. That just, it's probably going to be a $70 million deal, just the industrial use of those roads. And that bighorn sheep population is very dear to me. Before I was a commissioner, I was the chairman of the Carbon County Predatory Animal Control Board. We started the process of pre-introduction of that, reintroduction of that sheep from Oregon into there. I later moved on to the Animal Damage Management Board, where we made that successful, where that is something that we can cherish as a state. This is a success, how we do things.
Commissioner, it's just over 2 minutes just to tell you.
Okay.
Wrap up.
But in closing, I think in Wyoming, we have demonstrated that we can balance development with our ecological footprint on the deal. I do have severe concerns with the lack of information I do have to this point. I do thank you for your time and for hearing us today.
Thank you.
Mr.
Thank you, Commissioner Espy, for joining us today and driving up. Appreciate it. Committee, any questions of the commissioner? Senator Schuler, please.
It's not a question, but thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to say thank you so much for the local agencies that provided all this information. There was more information here than what, I mean, I needed a lot of this. And you talked about the road impacts. I couldn't find a lot of that information on the EIS, and as well as the rangeland and the economic impacts. So thank you for whoever did that. That was very, very, very good. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Appreciate that, Senator. Yeah, thank you so much for being here, Commissioner Espy, and your work and your service. We're going to go ahead and go to the mayor of Casper. I know he's going to be mad at me for keeping him tight on time, but he understands as he runs meetings. And I think everyone in the room, I bet we have 40 more people that are going to want to speak for 2 minutes. So don't be mad at me. We would love to stay here all day and hear your comments. You can submit comments online. I'm sure we can do it through the LSO website. All of our emails are available on the website. So if you want to submit comment, but if it's been said, please ditto it. And I am going to get pretty strict with my 2 minutes so we can get through this, your constituents. Mayor, welcome, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I timed this and it's 2 minutes, 7 seconds. I mean, I hope so. Anyway, appreciate the opportunity to come and speak to you today about this proposed Seminole pumped storage project. I want to make something very clear today. The city of Casper is not against development, especially energy development. We know that that is critical. This is not an argument against that. This argument is about making sure projects of this scale are evaluated completely. There is significant concerns around this. The city of Casper has formally submitted comments expressing concerns in the current analysis that has not sufficiently addressed potential downstream impacts and the quality of fisheries, recreation, wildlife, tourism, etc. These concerns are not theoretical for us. Casper relies directly on the North Platte River for drinking water, wastewater treatment, recreation, tourism, and the quality of life. The North Platte River and fishery include the Miracle Mile and Gray Reef is nationally recognized and serves as one of the major drivers of tourism, outdoor recreation, and we are talking about jobs. These visitors support guides, outfitters, hotels, restaurants, gas stations, support sporting goods stores, campgrounds, countless small business throughout Casper and Natrona County. One thing that very much concerns us, and I think it's important to acknowledge so I can wrap up here, is the communication that has happened with the city of Casper and H+ Hydro. I have not had a representative reach out to me to meet with our city staff, our experts, me as the mayor, and our city manager. I have not yet seen public comments that have been done here in Casper, and so we have serious concerns around that. One of the things that I want to make sure that you know is that we are not against energy, but we also want to talk about transparency and communication. That has not happened on the city's level. Thank you so much, and I stand for any questions.
Mayor, thank you for those comments. 2 minutes and 1 second. Committee, committee, questions of the good mayor. Committee, questions of the good mayor. And the mayor did ask me earlier if he could bring up one of his department heads, and I would like to hear from you and also give you 2 minutes. Please introduce yourself for the record.
Mr. Chairman, my name is Krista Johnston. I'm an environmental engineer and the public services director for the city of Casper. My history is that I am very familiar with wastewater treatment, so I wanted to bring forward some of the concerns I have regarding this project related to wastewater treatment for the regional wastewater treatment plant. We serve Casper, Mills, Evansville, Bar None, and Natrona County customers. So the biggest concern I have is we have a lack of understanding of the downstream impacts. If we don't know the downstream impacts, we are going to be behind the 8 ball if there are permit changes. So for our regional wastewater treatment plant, we have a discharge permit issued by the DEQ, and this permit development is a complex process in which DEQ establishes effluent limits for the plant based on the ability of the receiving water to assimilate each constituent while maintaining applicable water quality standards. If concentrations of these same constituents increase in the river due to other contributors or new projects like this, those increases must be considered when DEQ renews or modifies our wastewater plant's permits. So this project has the ability to affect us in having to control nutrients, nitrogen and phosphorus. Not only do we have issues with nitrogen and phosphorus from background information, or background constituents, but from fish kill. This project is estimated to kill an additional 24,000 fish per year, and the decomposition of their bodies will introduce more nitrogen and phosphorus into the river. So an increase in that concentration could result in more effluent limits for the wastewater treatment plant. This could result in the requirement of the plant to upgrade to an activated granular sludge process, which puts $100 million on the ratepayers of the Casper area. Additionally, other issues we've discussed are temperature, more treatment technologies, going up to 18 million for temperature control of our effluent, biological oxygen demand from those fish, decomposition, and then the other one that I'd like to highlight is sediment and heavy metals. The North Platte River had been listed as impaired for selenium. That through the hard work of the Natrona County Conservation District and working with CADE, we've been able to get the river delisted for selenium. But with the turbulence caused by the discharge of the water through this process, that those sediments in the reservoirs can be transmitted downstream and affect our ability to meet selenium requirements in our river. And that is expected to cost. So for the sake of the ratepayers in Casper area, having that downstream effect is important.
Ms. Johnson, thank you for those comments, concise comments. Committee, any questions? Ms. Johnson, any questions? Really appreciate that. And if you want to submit any of those public comments, please feel free to for the record. Representative Riggins, hate to do it to you, friend, but it's your constituents we want to hear from. So I'm going to set my timer and please welcome to joint TRW.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chairman, and members of the committee. I guess the thing that caught my attention as this whole discussion went on this morning was I hear from outdoor recreation and state parks that they've kind of been aware of this process for 4 or 5 years as this was going on. And it seems like others were finding out in just the last few months. And so the importance of being able to comment on these decision-making that allows you to have standing in any particular court case is extremely important. And how you get that information, I think, either needs to be improved, and where you find it needs to be a better clearinghouse of information for all these types of decision-making plans from land management and this. So I just wanted to bring that up because it did seem like there was a wide variety of people knowing when it was going to happen and being too late to really do much about it. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. I stand for any questions.
Thank you, Representative Riggins. Sounds like it could be a bill draft you could work on. Committee, any questions? The good representative, thank you for joining us today. Thank you for hosting us in your good city. Appreciate that. Any other electeds in the room that want to speak? Any other electeds? Okay, what I'm going to do here is we have 6 chairs. Sir, if you would like to speak, you're going to be first. If you're not, can you free up your seat? And I want the public to go ahead and come up and sit in these front 6 seats. Sorry to take your chair from you, sir. The co-chairman will buy you lunch. But yeah, please come fill these chairs. And then we have 4 chairs up here. Let's get this process moving quickly out of respect for time. And like I said, do not be offended when I cut you off at 2 minutes. You can always submit the public comment online. And if it's been said this morning and you want to reiterate, that's fine. But ditto also works. We're hearing a lot of consistencies and common threads. So with that, please introduce yourself for the record. Tell us who you're representing. And I will be starting my timer. Sir.
Chairman Byron and community members, my name is Jim Hissong. I'm from Mountain View in Uintah County, and I'm the National Leadership Council representative for Wyoming Trout Unlimited. Today, I represent 13 local chapters of Wyoming Trout Unlimited and their 1,300 members. We are in opposition to the proposed Seminole pump storage project. Even though TU agrees with responsible multiple use of natural resources, TU is committed to restore and protect cold, clean rivers and streams. That's the Miracle Mile. Cold water, clean stream. It's been sort of a misnomer as I've sat here today. Miracle Mile, remember, is 6 miles below the Seminole Reservoir. R Plus Hydro's plans for Seminole project admits to the possibility of warm water discharge and sediment increase downstream Seminole Dam as a result of its electric power generation. These effects of power generation cannot help but negatively impact the Miracle Mile, a world-class fishery. Yesterday, on my way up from Mountain View, 5-hour drive for me, when I head to Casper, my fly fishing gear is in my back of my truck. And I stopped at the Miracle Mile, of course, to fish. When I was there, I did some field research that I counted 15 Wyoming vehicles. This is Wednesday, in the middle of the week after Memorial Day. But 15 Wyoming vehicles and 12 rigs from out of state, Utah, mostly Colorado. But there was one family from Texas that I talked with that they come up here every other year to fish the Miracle Mile. That has.
Mr. Hassan, can you wrap it up?
Consideration. So,
Please.
having said that, thank you. Stand for any questions.
Committee, any questions? Thank you for traveling up here from Mountain View. Any questions, committee of Mr. Hassan? Appreciate it and appreciate catching up last night. Please introduce yourself for the committee in the record and we'll get this timer started.
Right, Chairman Byron, Chairman Landon, committee members. My name is Katie Cheesebro. I'm the Executive Director for the Wyoming Wild Sheep Foundation. And you've heard a lot here today about the importance of our bighorn sheep herd. I am a resident in Natrona County, so that is my local closest bighorn sheep herd. And when I'm tired of sitting in front of the computer, grab the kids and go down there to see sheep really easily and enjoy the Miracle Mile and all that the Ferris Seminoles have to offer. A little context on the Ferris Seminole herd. Senator Hicks did an excellent job of highlighting the fact that this is an incredible conservation success. In the early 2000s, there was only 13 sheep in the herd. Today, we're approaching 400 sheep, and those sheep are looking to expand their habitat, and a loss of habitat would be a real issue, and I want to explain why this is an issue. So the Ferris Seminole herd lives in a politically defined herd unit, and if they go beyond that herd unit, policy, for good reason, says that those sheep have to be removed because it could cause disease transmission and cause conflicts with agriculture to the east. We are currently trying to relocate some of these sheep and reintroduce sheep to the west in the Sweetwater Rocks. However, that's politically been unfeasible. So there's no place for these sheep to go. The Game and Fish has started instituting ewe lamb harvest to keep the population down so they don't run into these disease effects to the east. If you put a project that is disruptive for 5 to 7 years with constant truck traffic running through critical bighorn sheep winter range and parturition areas or lambing areas, those sheep are going to move and potentially run into disease issues and agricultural conflict to the east, or force the agency to remove those sheep. And so, as you've heard, this is the healthiest herd we have. It's the only herd we can use for reintroductions or augmentations. And that is why it's so important to us. Thank you.
Ms. Cheeseborough, thank you for those comments. Committee members, any questions of Ms. Cheeseborough? Committee, any questions? Thank you so much. We'll continue on the sheep theme, please. Introduce yourself for the committee.
Good morning, Representative Byron, committee. Thank you. My name is Braley Clifford, Wyoming native. I am the president for the Wyoming Wild Sheep Foundation. I am also the treasurer for the Wild Sheep Foundation on a national level. My husband's family is a bi-generational ranch owner in the Pedro Mountains, which is just, our property actually ends right next to the Miracle Mile. This is our backyard, quite literally. We, as the Wyoming Wild Sheep Foundation, who I'm primarily representing today, have spent since 2007, just our agency, this is not the other agencies, $950,000 on this herd for this reintroduction. Now, we are nonprofit. R Plus Hydro is a for-profit. I want to say they did put a number on what it would cost them to comply with wildlife restrictions regarding this project. It was $1.6 billion. I don't know how long it will take them to make back $1.6 billion, but I do know this herd doesn't have a monetary value. You can't put a dollar amount on each of these sheep. The devastating long-term impacts of the loss of this herd, not only within this state, but within the other states who have sheep, who could also benefit from transportation of these sheep to their areas, cannot be expressed in dollar amounts. I will stop with that and thank you.
Ms. Clifford, thank you for that insight and thank you for your comments as somebody that's near and dear to the Miracle Mile and very close to the sheep herd. Committee, any questions of Ms. Clifford before we let her go? Seeing none, really appreciate your comments. Please introduce yourself for the public record and tell us who you're representing.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, thank you for the opportunity to comment today. My name is Cece Oliver, and I manage the Ugly Bug Fly Shop and Crazy Rainbow Fly Fishing located right here in Casper. We've been an institution in Casper for 42 years. Between our business as a whole, we employ 45 people. I would like to point out that 45 jobs would be at risk when the proponent is offering 35. I don't feel like that is quite a fair trade-off, especially given we are not the only operation like this in the area. Simply put, our business exists because people like to travel here. Tourism tied to our rivers and public lands is not secondary to our work. It is the foundation of it. And when people stop coming here to hunt, fish, camp, and experience these places, local business will feel it immediately. We choose to live in Casper because of what it offers, and it's my belief that many visitors come here for the same reason: to escape the noise, the congestion, the industrialization of larger cities, and experience something that still feels distinctly Wyoming. The scale of this development proposed would permanently alter that experience, not just during construction, but for years to come. That represents years of reduced business activity, lower tourism revenue, and direct impacts to workers and communities. What's especially frustrating, as spoken about today, is alternatives clearly exist. I do want to be clear that if these fisheries decline, the businesses and communities built around them will decline as well. Also, as a young person who lives in Wyoming and makes my living off the tourism and outdoor recreation industry, I think what concerns me the most about this project is the precedent that it sets. This proposal requires exemptions from existing land use and wildlife protections in order to move forward. It is my belief that if a project only works by loosening protections that were specifically created to safeguard habitat and sensitive resources, then perhaps it is not suited for the location in the first place. And once exemptions begin to be made in places as valuable as the Miracle Mile and the Seminole sheep herd, it becomes much easier to justify similar compromises elsewhere in Wyoming. There is little meaningful local support for this project. Energy storage may absolutely be in our future, but it should not be at this expense. And if we accept this here, I believe we will accept this everywhere in Wyoming. Thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Oliver, and thank you to the Ugly Bug for being represented today. Certainly appreciate the service you provide for the state, taking all of our nice visitors out on the river and showing them a good, safe experience. Committee, any questions of Ms. Oliver? Any questions? Thank you. Ready? We can go. We'll keep working our way that way. If you're ready, sir. Yep. Please introduce yourself for the public record and begin.
Good morning. My name is Steve Oliver. My wife Julie and I own 2 RV parks in Alcova, Wyoming. So we appreciate the opportunity to be on the record today, Mr. Chairman and committee. Thank you so much. Since we bought this property in 2021, we've invested over $1 million of our own money in upgrading the RV park and making it a really, really nice place for people to stay in the area that we're discussing right now. So it's a very important to us. People from all over the world have been to our RV park to fish and enjoy the area around Alcova and downstream from this project. Our feeling on this project that if there's any risk of a negative impact on fisheries or wildlife, then the potential cost is too high, period. That's our opinion as business owners and being in the hospitality industry. As property and business owners, we want to express our strong opposition to the project, and we hope that downstream impacts are considered outside of Carbon County. In our opinion, we should err on the side of preserving the resource. One other thing that I think was interesting in earlier discussion was that some of the mitigation process was based on self-reporting by the proponent of this project. I would just remind you that Boeing was also allowed to self-certify and were required to self-report, and a lot of people flying in 737s didn't come out so well on that deal. So generally speaking, when you have for-profit interests that are required to self-report in order to certify, it can potentially lead to problems. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Oliver. Really appreciate that perspective from down the road, close to this project. Committee, any questions of Mr. Oliver while we have him up on the hot seat? Any questions? Not seeing any. Really appreciate it. We're going to continue on. I'd like Representative Storr to pay attention as this is a constituent of yours. Please introduce yourself. And it's really great to see someone from Teton County all the way over in Casper to comment on this.
Chair, co-chair, members, thank you for taking the time today. I'm Sam Mead, candidate for U.S. Senate, and I have the utmost confidence that the people in this state and their leadership and our state agencies can come to balanced solutions that conserve the environment and also bolster our energy portfolio. My concern is that the concerns of the people in this room are not being represented in Washington, and I intend to change that very soon. That's all.
Thank you, Mr. Mead. Committee, any questions of Mr. Mead while we have him in the hot seat? Any questions? Seeing none. Appreciate you being here today. Please introduce yourself for public record and welcome to join TRW.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, thank you for your time today. My name is Michaela Patterson, and I'm here representing Friends of the North Platte, a coalition of anglers, hunters, recreationists, conservationists, landowners, and Wyoming businesses. Most of us work in the outdoor industry. We guide on the river, fish it, hunt around it, and rely on these landscapes for our livelihoods and our personal passions. Together, we represent more than 300 Wyoming residents and river users, along with 36 businesses that have a direct stake in the North Platte River. We're not opposed to energy storage. We all depend on reliable power, but I do not believe the public fully understands the scope of the proposed project. The proposed project does not generate energy. It stores energy. Wyoming is being asked to carry the environmental and economic risk in one of the most important recreation and wildlife corridors in the state to store energy. This project puts a blue ribbon trout fishery, critical bighorn sheep habitat, and a long-standing recreation economy at risk for very little local benefit, and the public comment reflects that. How long-term impacts are being discussed as if they are easily contained is a great concern. Fisheries do not have to collapse overnight to be permanently changed. Warm water stress, sediment disturbance, entrainment, and repeated operational swings all add up over time. Eventually, the fishery and the experience that people come here for are no longer the same. By the time the impacts are fully measurable, it is already too late. We're in a drought right now, and Seminole Reservoir is sitting at 32% capacity. The analysis does not fully reflect the low water conditions we're already experiencing, let alone what future dry years may hold. The assurances being offered rely heavily on modeling and adaptive management. This project is being proposed in a system that is already stressed and becoming less predictable. The adaptive management framework feels less like prevention and more like an adverse impact. The same concerns apply to wildlife. We've heard about the bighorn sheep. I'll just say ditto to Katie's speech. The proponent's response appears to be adjusting existing protections because the sheep interfere with construction and operations and quite frankly just cost too much money. From our perspective, that is the wrong direction. Those protections exist because this landscape and these animals are worth protecting. The DEIS estimates more than 117,000 lost recreation visits in Carbon County during construction alone. The economic impacts will extend well beyond construction, and the impacts to communities like Casper were never fully analyzed in the socioeconomic report.
Ms. Patterson, I sense you're wrapping up, but can we try to get there so we can get to more comments?
At the end of the day, this comes down to whether the North Platte River and the Miracle Mile are the right place for a project of this scale and the uncertainty it contains. For our community, the stakes are too high and the trade-off feels minimal in comparison. Thank you.
Appreciate that. And thank you for your advocacy and speaking on behalf of that watershed. Committee, any questions of Ms. Patterson? Seeing none, really appreciate you commenting today. We're going to work to her right, just so everyone can prep, if that's all right. Whoever wants a bite of the apple, go ahead, sir. If you're ready, I'd love to take your comment.
From Casper, Wyoming. Chairman and co-chairman. It was said in the executive summary of R Plus that they will produce 29 gigawatt hours annually. What they don't say in the executive summary is that they will use 3,900 gigawatt hours annually to generate 2,900 gigawatts annually. So that's a loss of 1,000 gigawatt hours annually. To put that in perspective, Dave Johnson Power Plant produces 4,200 gigawatt hours annually. So 25% of Dave Johnson output will be taken off of the grid. So it's not a generator of electricity, it's a consumer, a huge consumer. 25% of Dave Johnson power daily. As you know, the Corporations Commission met earlier this week with legislators, and their concern was that Wyoming is not going to have enough energy in the future. So we're taking off 25% of Dave Johnson with this facility. The second thing is 10,000 acre feet of water is going to be moving up to the top of Bennett Mountain every day, and 10,000 acre feet is going to be moving down every day. So the when you move that much water in a canyon that's 1.5 miles long, it is going to disturb the water. There's no question when you move that much water every day, twice a day, you're going to have turbidity increase. So thank you.
Mr. Swanson, thank you so much for being here and sharing your city with us while we have a committee meeting here. Questions, committee of Mr. Swanson and his testimony. Questions? Really appreciate it, sir. Please, for the record, introduce yourself and tell us who you're representing. And those that are waiting to testify, there's a couple open chairs. Go ahead and fill them up and we'll keep this moving. Please.
My name is Shelley Applegate. I guess I'm representing myself as a citizen of the state of Wyoming. I've been a resident here all my life, have had the great opportunity to fish the Miracle Mile, to see the bighorn sheep, and to actually be the only person out there in Christmas of 2015. So it was awesome. And I guess I want to say I'm disappointed in the fact that I feel like Natrona County has behind the 8 ball on this, so that R Plus Energy was more focusing in Carbon County and not Natrona County. So I kind of feel like we're trying to make up time on things that have already been decided. So that's concerning to me. I'm hoping that we still have avenues in order to stop this, because I echo the concerns of so many others that this is not the right location for this project, that this is a very sensitive area. There's so many other animals that could be affected by this that haven't been talked about, from the raptors to the sage chickens to the mule deer to the elk. I mean, it goes on. And it's our recreation site. And I think we deserve to really have the final say in this and be more part of the process. And I just do not feel like that has happened. So I very much appreciate the opportunity to speak here today. I appreciate you guys having this forum where we can express concerns about this project. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Applegate. And I bet that was a pretty special Christmas day in 2015. Committee, any questions of Ms. Applegate? Committee, really appreciate you being here today. Sir, please introduce yourself for the record and go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair and members of the committee. My name is Wayne Stewart. I'm the Director of Marketing and Communications at Visit Casper. As the destination marketing organization for Casper and Natrona County, our role is to support the visitor economy, tourism-related jobs, and the recreational assets that help define Wyoming's identity and quality of life. So for the sake of time, I'll just say ditto to what Mayor Pacheco and CC Oliver both said in regards to tourism and the impact that this project will have on tourism dollars and jobs. I'd like to stress that tourism and hospitality are Wyoming's second largest industry and a critical part of Natrona County's economy. Outdoor recreation is not just a benefit, it is a primary economic driver for our communities. I'd also like to stress one more additional point, and that is that Visit Casper is not opposed to development or energy innovation. Wyoming's future depends on balanced economic growth across multiple industries. However, development should not come at the expense of an existing industry that already provides proven renewable economic value to Wyoming communities every year. Tourism is uniquely tied to place. Once access, visitor confidence, and the quality of the experience are diminished, recovery is not immediate and cannot be guaranteed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart, for your comments, and thank you for being involved in Wyoming's #2 economy, bringing nearly $4 billion of economic impact a year. Really appreciate that and the work you're doing here in Casper. With that, I'm going to give the folks that just sat down a second to collect their thoughts, ma'am. If you're ready to go, I'm going to go to you. Please introduce yourself for the record and begin.
Thank you. My name is Ann McKinnon. I'm just a citizen of Casper. I appreciate the chance to speak to the committee, to both chairmen and to all of you. Thank you. I have written and taught about energy for a long time, and I wanted to mention, I ditto to what has been said about how this is a net energy loss, but also I wanted to point out that the charts you were shown about demand and supply and the need for energy, they take no account. I remember charts like that from the early 80s, and they took no account of what's called elasticity of demand. There's response to prices, there's response to changing needs. Maybe these data centers, which some people think is a bubble, won't happen. Just remember that when you think about those charts. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony today. Thank you for being here. Committee, any questions of Ms. McKinn? Did I get that right, Ms. McKinn? Thank you. Any?
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, Mr. Co-Chairman, please.
Quickly, I just want to tip my hat to a fellow journalist from years and years ago. Ms. McKinnon and I were on the Casper Star Tribune together. We were reporters and editors together, and that goes back a ways. It was a couple of years ago now, but yeah, it's good to see you, Ann.
Thank
Thanks.
you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Co-Chairman, is that when we used to get it in our mailbox out front? I might have not been alive, but just, you don't have to answer that question. Thank you for your comments. Yes, Representative Storr, please.
I'll just say Ms. McKinnon is also an expert on water issues in the state of Wyoming. So you're not just a member of Casper. So good to see you, Ann. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner, for the record, please.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chair, members of the committee, my name is John Masterson. I'm here in my capacity as a citizen of the state of Wyoming, particularly living in the central part of our state. The North Platte River is why Casper is where it is. It is who we are. It's a part of our identity. It is priceless. It is irreplaceable, not only to Casper, but all the way from the headwaters in Colorado, all the way to Casper, all the way to Glen Rock, all the way to Douglas, all the way into Nebraska. It brings us tourism and recreation. And why in the world we would want to risk and play around with an asset like the North Platte River, especially in a time of drought, escapes me. Especially when even the model that the promoter of this project bought and paid for, that's where the model comes from. They paid for it, shows that there will be risk. And if the Miracle Mile dies off once every 10 years, guess what? It's still died off every 10 years. And you're going to have sub-lethal events happening due to temperature in the Miracle Mile. We have not talked about deer, raptors, sage grouse, as another commenter mentioned. Those are at play as well. It's been mentioned, this is an electrical storage facility. It's not a generator. Somebody's going to pay for those for that cost to store that. And I will bet you $1, it's the ratepayers of the state of Wyoming who are going to have to pay for it. We learned today that 4 years ago, the promoter of this project began to cooperate with the Department of Environmental Quality. We learned that FERC application was filed January of 2023. And you also learned today that there has been zero outreach to the community of Casper. I'll bet there's probably been none to Glen Rock, to Douglas, to our downstream neighbors about the consequences of what they want to do. There's been no communication. So when you're talking about what degree of trust and faith do you have in this developer that they will shut things down when it needs to be shut down, that they will be responsive to problems, that they will pick up the phone, I believe that is something that you should consider. They've had one meeting by Zoom with the Natrona County Commission.
Mr. Masterson. Can we wrap
Mr.
up,
Chairman,
please, sir?
I will end with that, and I thank you for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you, Mr. Masterson, in your civilian role. Really appreciate it. Committee, any questions? Yes.
Just a quick comment. Really appreciate it, Commissioner. Thank you. From my standpoint, it's been kind of interesting today. I spent last week in a corporations committee meeting for 2 days. And of course, one of the topics was the lack of power on the Western power grid. And what is Wyoming going to do about that? And we talked about the soda ash plants down in the southwest part of the state, which want to expand, but there is no power. And those soda ash plants down here where my good colleague represents pay somewhere between 60 and $70 million a year in taxes to the state of Wyoming. So been kind of interesting to go from that to the discussion today. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chairman. Please introduce yourself to the committee. Anyone else? A couple open chairs up here. We're seeing some open chairs up here. Don't be scared. We'll all be nice, but please introduce yourself for the record and state your name and please begin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Excuse me, my name's Cam Walker. I'm here on behalf of myself. I grew up in Casper, lived my whole life here. And one of the great days I remember was a cold day, I think it's January, February, fishing the Miracle Mile under the watchful eyes of a bighorn sheep ram, a gorgeous guy, watching me fish. And as I listened to the testimony here and I see that actually they're taking more energy than they're going to generate. So why would they do this? Answer, money. They think they can make money doing it this way. And the impacts that they leave, this is a forever project. This is not something that comes and goes. We will live with the consequences of this project forever. I'm against that. And, you know, many of us rely really upon the federal government to protect the lands that we use. Public lands are a resource to us. And we trust them. We do trust them. And I think this is an opportunity to see whether the feds are worthy of that trust. I have nothing further. Thank you very much.
Mr. Walker, thank you for being here. Thank you for that story. Committee, any questions, testimony, questions? Seeing none, appreciate that. Anyone else, go ahead and queue up if you're ready to testify. If not, we may be moving to our last piece of public comment. Please introduce yourself for the record.
Rosemary Saban, Natrona County resident. I guess I'm going to recap because I'm not changing this one more time. Rocky Mountain Power's pending 8.8% proposal follows recent substantial rate increases, including a 10.2% rate hike approved in the spring of 2025 and a 5.5% increase in January of 2024. Pump storage hydroelectricity is inefficient due to thermodynamic and mechanical losses with a round trip efficiency of around 60%, resulting in 40% energy lost. We heard that testimony earlier. Pump storage acts as a massive physical battery, utilizing surplus energy to pump water to a higher elevation, which is then released to generate electricity when demand is high. The question remains, shouldn't surplus wind energy funded by Wyoming residents be used to offset costs for ratepayers instead of going to waste? I came to speak to you today because I am a CADE shareholder, irrigation, and over a decade in the oil field. I pump water. Thank you.
Appreciate those comments, Ms. Saban. Thank you. Committee, any questions of the testimony? Seeing none. Anyone else in the room? Last bite at the apple here before we close public comment. I will look at LSO in a moment and see if there's anyone online. There's not anyone online, so anyone else in the room? With that, I will close public comment. It is 12:11. Committee, I would like to give Mr. Baker, who traveled this way, a few minutes, if he would like. If he wouldn't like, no pressure, to have closing remarks. I think that's fair, seeing that I cut him off by about 90% in his intended presentation. So unless anyone objects to that, I will go ahead and offer that to him. He does not need to take it. Okay, great. Thank you for being here. And with that, certainly would entertain any committee directives, additional discussions, but don't want to stand between you and lunch, and we have a pretty robust afternoon plan. So please, yeah, if you're ready. Yeah, sorry, I thought a thumbs up was a no, but yeah, Mr. Co-Chairman, before he begins, please.
Just a salute, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for charging through, and appreciate everybody's understanding on the difficulties of an agenda that could have taken a couple of days, and we compressed it into the time that we did. So good job, Mr. Chairman. And I think it is appropriate to bring Mr. Baker back up. It was good of you to be here, Mr.
Yep.
Baker.
And with that, anyone else that wants to submit public comment, we can do it through LSO. Our emails are available on the website. With that, Mr. Baker, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Brian's and Landon, I appreciate that. It's been a rewarding day for me today. There's a lot of concern about the project. I'm aware of that. A lot of questions. I'm happy to answer any questions you have about that. I want you to know that there are answers to the questions that are there. A lot of them I'm able to do. If people want to come shake my hand and take my card, I'm happy to do that. I actually appreciate hearing comments that people are concerned about. I want to give you some confidence that the process that FERC has done is legitimate. It's different. I totally agree with you on that. They have what's called, you're not actually allowed to call FERC up. I can call BLM up any day and say, hey, we're working on this, and we have a relationship with them. They have a policy whereby people can't actually call and talk to them. You have to put it on the record. It's all in writing. That's where they consider it. Sometimes that leads to a lot of confusion and consternation. I totally understand that. I have my own challenges with that at times as well. But I will tell you that it is a process. It's a legitimate process that FERC has utilized it for a long time. They've built a lot of dams in this country. They understand what the issues and concerns are, particularly about habitat. They deal with critical habitat all the time. And they're charged by Congress to actually manage that. I would also say that, that the process is actually very important to me. We've engaged with it. We have not tried to avoid it. We want to engage with people. I'll tell you that the Casper Rotary Club just called us a couple of weeks ago and asked us to do a presentation. We're more than happy to do that. We want that. We want to engage with it. I read every single comment that's been placed on FERC's website about the project, and I take them into consideration and try to implement those in the policies and programs that we have. We have 29 prevention, mitigation, and enhancement plans, including raptors, sage grouse, habitat, old growth forest, invasive species management, bighorn sheep plans. All are designed to protect and mitigate impacts of the project. Those are all being reviewed by the agencies. Those are all being reviewed by FERC, and the state may have confidence that a process is ongoing by expert people that are being reviewed, and that all the comments that were taken today are being considered. And I want that to happen. I want a robust conversation. I want to be able to answer questions that you have, because there are answers, and they're important answers. And I would just simply say that I think that, before I take any other questions, say that I believe that the Seminole Project is a singular opportunity for the state of Wyoming. It represents an opportunity to increase its infrastructure project, its energy infrastructure, not only for today, but for tomorrow. It allows Wyoming to get access to power across the grid at cheaper prices, and to hold that energy here in the state and to distribute it as needed when it's needed. That is a massive, massive benefit to the state, particularly as it's trying to focus on advanced manufacturing, mining, data centers, and other types of energy uses within the state. I honestly believe that it's about Wyoming's future. It's about the ability to have energy and economic growth, not only for today, but for tomorrow. With that, I'm happy to take your questions. Please, anybody here, please come talk to me, shake my hand. I'm happy to answer any question you have.
Thank you, Mr. Baker. I appreciate that. And once again, I want to reiterate, I appreciate you coming and accepting our invitation. Mr. Co-Chairman, before we open it to any committee questions, please.
Yeah, thank you. And Mr. Baker, thanks again. I just wanted to point out, I think you've spent quite a bit of time here. So when you talk about Wyoming, you were up in the northeast part of the state for a while. Is that right?
Yes, I lived in Gillette for 10 years.
Had to deal with those coal mines and coal and all sorts of other, power issues, right? I just wanted to point that out. So welcome. Thanks for coming back
Great to be
today
back.
and
Yeah.
appreciate it.
Committee, we'll get to you, Senator. Absolutely. Committee, any questions over here? Okay, Senator Hicks, please.
Yeah, I want to echo, I appreciate you coming here. I mean, it's been informational and stuff, and I think you've heard loud and clear, you know, we're not anti-energy. But the real fundamental question comes down is it possible to mitigate unmitigatable impacts? So I think that's the question. And then we pose the risk analysis. And so what's the risk associated with implementing a project that you can't mitigate because it has unmitigatable impacts? And I think that's the question that we're all asking ourselves. And so the idea that we can go out and fix something once we temporarily or a long time, our history is that's not always the case. We have to acknowledge sometimes that there's some things that once you get rid of them, they're not coming back. And it doesn't matter how much money or anything else you throw at that project. So I think a lot of the concerns is the risk associated with losing something that we can't mitigate. And so how we do that, and your challenge, I think, is to answer that question. How do you mitigate unmitigatable impacts? So thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate you being here today. Clearly, I think there's opportunities involved working with your organization, your business. I love free capitalism. I love making money. We need to figure out how to do both. But the challenges today are a little bit difficult.
Thank you, Senator Hicks. Mr. Baker, if you would like to answer that comment/question, you're free to.
You want me to answer the unanswerable? Is that the question?
But I certainly don't expect it to. I think the good senator was.
No, it's a great question. And honestly, it's one that I contemplated as I was preparing for this hearing, to be honest. The real question is, you know, why do we want to risk the vital resources that we have, whether that's terrestrial or aquatics here in the state for a project? I think that's one of the most valid questions that's been asked today. So I want to thank you for that. But my answer is simple. I think I've been doing this for 27 years. I deal in impacts. I try very hard not to minimize impacts, to blow them by, and I try very hard not to exacerbate impacts. I try to put them in their proper place and then ask the question, can we actually find meaningful and reasonable solutions to allow the benefits of these projects to go forward while minimizing or avoiding those impacts altogether? I think reasonable people can disagree on what and how that goes about. The only thing I can tell you is that I've been working on this project for 5 years. Those are the top of the mind questions. And whether it's sage grouse, bighorn sheep, mule deer, where the transmission line goes, what water is going to be used. I can tell you that you know, from a water perspective, we heard today from the DEQ that they're okay and that there are not going to be any downstream impacts on that. I can tell you that I worked for almost 4 years and that the scrutiny that was placed on me by the Department of Environmental Quality was the highest I've ever experienced in my 27-year career. I learned more about water quality than I have ever learned in my entire legal life, and I'm grateful for that. There were times where I wondered if we were going to find a meaningful pathway forward, but we did. And I'm grateful that Wyoming DEQ could sign off on that. This isn't a decision by me. It isn't by the company. This is a state decision on water quality coming from DEQ. The nice thing about the FERC process is that even though FERC has meaningful decision points when it comes to habitat or quality of construction and things like that, there are areas of decision-making within the state, and water quality is one of those. And that the state exercised that in a robust way, that they managed it in a meaningful way, should speak volumes to the state for businesses like me who want to come in and say, can we actually do this and go through the process? We did, and it was successful, and I think you can rely on it. As it relates to terrestrial impacts, we're working on that as hard as we can. One of the things that I would say is that FERC has issued in the draft environmental impact statement that the bighorn sheep herd is strong, that it can adapt to some of these issues over the short term, and that the mitigation impacts that we are proposing and the ones that we are actually proposing in addition to what FERC has asked for are sufficient. And I think there may be some trust involved in that. But that's the decision that the lead federal agency in their NEPA process and in the charge that they have has made a decision on. My goal is to improve on that. When we get to the contracting portion of this, I'm going to sit down with the contractors and say, can we use different equipment? Can we do different lighting? Can we use different techniques or time this in a different way so that we can actually improve on the minimization of impacts that we already have in place? I can tell you, moving the spoil pile from alternative A to alternative D was a major lift for this project. It was incredibly expensive. It took a lot of time. And it was done at the request of Wyoming Game and Fish to mitigate impacts to bighorn sheep. Now, are they all the way there yet? No. And I think as we get the final environmental impact statement out here in a couple of weeks, that everybody will get a chance to reset, refresh, and say, okay, this is what FERC is at least saying are the impacts for this project and what the minimizations are. I fully intend to sit down with everybody once that gets done to have more discussions to see, can we improve on it? So I can't tell you that everything's not avoidable, but I can tell you we have minimization and mitigation efforts in place if they aren't.
Thank you, Mr. Baker. Committee, we have about 5 minutes to lunch. Any other questions? Representative Jarvis, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I almost called you Mr. Speaker. I guess the question I have is, should it not be able to be mitigated like Game and Fish said? How many current jobs in Wyoming is that impacting?
Can you help me?
Like the anglers, everybody who profits from.
Yeah, great question. Representative, if I could answer that really quickly. We actually don't expect any impacts downstream. Don't expect any. So the studies we have done and that have been reviewed by FERC, and FERC, they build dams. They do this all the time. They understand what the impacts to fisheries are on larger scales than what we're dealing with here. And they have determined that we're not going to have an impact on fish. Okay, the habitats are not going to be changed. I know a lot of people are concerned about that. That is not what the administrative record for the project actually shows. The project, again, the biggest impacts for the project are going to be during the construction period. Those are primarily traffic related. The Seminole State Park is not going to be shut down. The Miracle Mile is not going to be impacted in terms of fishing. Water flows are still going to be the same. Water quality will still be the same. And we're actually concerned that people feel like they're going to be impacted on that because we believe that impact is a legitimate concern, but that the record itself shows that we have taken appropriate actions to mitigate that.
Thank you, Mr. Baker. Committee, last bite of the apple. We're going to go ahead and get going towards lunch. Anything else, committee? Representative Connolly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I still keep going back to you say you got to mitigate, you'll mitigate. Once you find out there's an issue, you're going to mitigate it. But what is the damage that's done between the time you know in real time that there's an incident to the time where you actually get it mitigated? How many fish will die or what'll happen in between? What's that time frame that I'm trying to get at? Because it's not you can't just mitigate it immediately. So where's that timeline in there and how much damage can be done between the time you know there's a problem and the time you get it fixed?
That's a great question. I'm assuming you're talking about the water quality. Is that correct? That's a follow-on to your question earlier. And I actually appreciated that. As I said, and as what DEQ said, the Water Quality Adaptive Management Plan is intended to establish a robust regulatory framework for the annual evaluation of the system itself. The times of greatest concern for the project are in low water years in September. We are required to start the reporting process with DEQ interactively in July. And so there are two components which they talked about. It is elevations in the Seminole Reservoir and increasing temperatures in the Miracle Mile. Those are independent of each other. You have to have both. And when both are showing that, so it's going down and temperatures are going up, there are automatic controls that are put on. It's immediate. Okay, it's not, so it happens long before any type of exceedance may actually occur. And that's the reason why they set the parameters at a historically conservative level, so that the plan itself is proactive. It is not reactive. We're not actually waiting for an exceedance to occur. We're monitoring. If elevations are going up, then the project is shut down immediately, and we can't restart that until the temperatures start to recede on that. That is written in stone in the adaptive management plan, and we're serious about following that.
Thank you, Mr. Baker. Committee, with that, you got something, Representative Harshman? And then we're gonna go to lunch. You don't want to stand between me and lunch, so.
Yeah, no, I could miss a meal or two, I'm sure.
No, I don't think you're inferring that, but.
And Co-Chairman, I guess I'm just wondering where we're going with this as a committee. I mean, this was really important to have a public discussion and have this forum, and it's all broadcast, but are we going to try to
well, Representative Harshman,
push bills through or take bill requests? Let me finish here a little bit. Are we going to do bill requests and vote on proposals of that, or are we just going to be done now with this and not have any? I mean, I heard some suggestions for solutions to some of this as we move forward. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
thank you, Representative Harshman. And here would be my suggestion to the committee at 12:28. We do have some time right now for committee directives in the agenda. I also think that depending on the afternoon goes at 3 o'clock, we have a little time slot for committee directives. I'm assuming, and I'm reading my committee here, that we need some time to digest this, maybe over the lunch hour, and then have a robust discussion at that time. If that works for you, Representative Harshman. I think that there's been a long 4 hours and a lot of information to download and process. So with that, if you agree, Mr. Co-Chairman, I think we're going to go ahead and adjourn for lunch. Let's be back at 1:30, and please know that we will have an opportunity committee at that time to have committee directives. 1:30. Mr. Co-Chairman. And hey, I just want to once again say thank you to all the residents of Casper and the state that came and showed up today and testified. I'll stick around. Mr. Baker's offered to stick around. With that, we'll see everyone at 1:30.